Space Shuttle Discovery will leave the Earth with all the fuel it can carry in order to get more than 200 miles up to the Hubble Space Telescope. After the dramatic repair of the telescope in December 1993, the world is waiting to see what a new group of astronauts can do to make the telescope work even better.
The new instruments that will be installed on 82 are going to increase the telescope's spectral sensitivity into regions where scientists will be able to look back at very early times in the universe to galaxies that are thought to be very, very far away. They'll be able to penetrate some of these stellar nurseries that Hubble identified, like the Eagle Nebula photograph that's fairly well known, and we'll begin to maybe add closure to some of those questions.
The crew who did the first Hubble repair spacewalks came home stiff and sore because they used muscles inside their spacesuits that aren't normally used on Earth. The new crew has hired a trainer.
Beth Shepard is our trainer, and she's excellent. She's also devious and mean. And can work out, muscles that you didn't even know you had. And so we've been working with her, and she'll prescribe exercises specifically for hands and forearms and shoulders.
Once Discovery grabs the telescope, the astronauts will go to work, replacing two of the major instruments inside and a series of smaller systems. One standard tape recorder will be replaced with a new digital version with no moving parts. The astronauts have spent days training to touch the telescope in a way that won't bend the fragile supports for the Hubble solar panels.
The structural members that hold the arrays out there are kind of like tape measures, two U-channels, one inside each other. And if you bend over a tape measure, it tends to stay.
Because the telescope flies over the United States at night these days, the shuttle will take off before dawn, and Commander Ken Bowersox will get to land it at night on the trip home.
A night landing is, to most of us, a little more challenging than a daylight landing, and so to me that'll be just a little bit more fun than my last one, and I'm looking forward to it.
If it's anything like the previous Hubble repair mission, the 4 nights of spacewalking repair will provide more beautiful pictures of the Earth and the astronauts working outside. John Holloman, CNN reporting.
CNN plans live coverage of the launch of the Shuttle Discovery coming about 13 hours from now.
Discovery. Technicians say the leak is very small or may simply be an instrument problem. At any rate, it hasn't switched off the countdown clock for Tuesday morning's launch. Discovery astronauts are preparing to upgrade the Hubble Space Telescope.
As to light up the night skies. A late start fueling the Space Shuttle Discovery for liftoff less than 2 hours from now. These are live pictures you're seeing from Florida of the astronauts preparing. The delay was caused by unusually high concentrations of oxygen in the fuselage. Engineers say it could be a matter of false readings and determined there's no significant problem to keep Discovery on the ground. CNN's John Holloman has more on the mission.
The following is CNN's coverage of a live event.
Hello, I'm John Holloman at CNN Center in Atlanta. We welcome our international viewers to live coverage of the Space Shuttle Discovery launch. The next 5 minutes should provide us with some of the prettiest pictures of a shuttle launch we've ever seen. Here's what's happening right now. Discovery is operating on its own power. 3 auxiliary power units, which provide steering, are all running. They've been tested. They seem to be working well. The live picture here from the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center shows a gaseous oxygen vent hood, as NASA calls it, being removed from the top of the shuttle. That's got to be out of the way before this spaceship leaves the Earth. CNN correspondent, Miami Bureau Chief John Zarella is joining us from the Kennedy Space Center. John, it's a beautiful morning for a launch, it looks like. Any problems in the last few minutes?
No, none that we've been able to detect, John, and at least it's a beautiful morning now. Earlier this evening, of course, a stream of clouds overhead moving across the Kennedy Space Center, but they began to break up a couple of hours ago, and it's a cool, crisp night here in Central Florida. Weather conditions all green, the Air Force meteorologists say. That means all a go here in the next less than 2 minutes, John.
We see Commander Ken Bowersox looking out the left side window of the shuttle. He and his crew of 6 are in their seats right now. They've got to be getting an adrenaline rush right now. 5 seconds before liftoff, the 3 main engines will come on. They burn a mixture of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, and you'll see some spark generators at the base of the engines, which make sure those 2 gases ignite and explode when they're supposed to. If all 3 main engines are working properly, 5 seconds later, at T-0 in the countdown, the 2 solid rocket boosters, those big white things on the side of the shuttle, will ignite, and Discovery will lift off the pad. The plan is for the shuttle to slowly increase its speed for about 30 seconds, then really start going fast. By 2 minutes after liftoff, when the solid rocket boosters burn out and are jettisoned, the shuttle will be traveling 3,700 miles an hour, more than 6,000 kilometers an hour. We're less than a minute away from launch right now. Just to fill you in on what we'll be watching, 6 minutes later, the shuttle will be traveling at 17,500 miles an hour, more than 30,000 kilometers an hour, and it will be in orbit. 35 seconds to launch now. The voice of NASA's launch control is Lisa Malone. We'll listen to her go through the final 30 seconds of the countdown. John Zarella will be standing by with us in case there are problems. 20 seconds to launch.
T-minus 15 seconds and counting. All systems go. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7. We have a go for engine start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Discovery now on its way to service NASA's Hubble Space Telescope.
Houston now controlling.
We're all programmed, Houston.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
John Zarella.
Heads down position on course for a 28.5 degree, 309 nautical mile orbit.
John Zarella, what does it feel like where you're standing right now, about 3 miles from where that spaceship just left the Earth?
And downrange from the launch site, 1.5 miles as well.
Shuttle's making a lot of noise. John Zarella may not be able to hear us.
Down now as the orbiter prepares to pass through the area of maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle in the lower atmosphere.
What did it feel like
now at
when that shuttle
67% of rated
left
thrust.
the ground 30 seconds ago?
The engine's now beginning to throttle back up.
John, what's the atmosphere like on the ground where you are, and what was it like when the shuttle left?
Well, John, the rumble and the roar, you see it first, and of course then it begins to rattle closer and closer. The shock waves moving across, and the whole platform we're standing on begins to shake. Right now I can hear the alarms on the cars going off, which is an occurrence at every launch. The car alarms are set off here in the parking lot. There's a cacophony of sound out here right now as those alarms go off. The vehicle, of course, now well on its way, and it wasn't quite as loud as sometimes. It just depends on the direction of the wind, and the wind blowing from the north to the south this evening took away a little bit of the edge off of that sound and shock wave that we usually get. But nonetheless, just a spectacular liftoff as it went through that first layer of lower clouds and then emerged back out into the clear night sky. John?
All right, solid rocket boosters just separated, John Zarella. While the shuttle's gone, 4 of the astronauts will be walking in space, replacing parts on the Hubble Space Telescope with new ones. The improvements will allow the telescope to see things it hadn't been able to see before. The spacewalks will begin 2 days from now. All of it will happen at about this time. For U.S. viewers, the spacewalks will start at midnight Eastern Time and continue through 6 in the morning. If you're a night owl in the U.S. or a morning viewer of CNN International, you will get quite a show. The last Hubble repair mission, more than 3 years ago, was one of the most spectacular picture shows ever seen by people on Earth. CNN has lined up a major team of experts to help us understand this mission. We'll be joined by astronomers from the Space Telescope Science Institute, from NASA, and several universities. 2 of the astronauts who did the spacewalks in 1993 will be with us live, including Story Musgrave, the repair leader, and Kathy Thornton, who removed a damaged solar panel from Hubble and threw it out into space, one of the most dramatic things we saw. All in all, this is going to be a fabulous time to watch space exploration in action, and if CNN's work over the past month pays off, CNN will definitely be the best place to watch all of this. You can still see the shuttle. John, from where you are standing, I doubt you have the benefit of NASA's huge tracking camera. Can you still see anything in the sky?
Oh yeah, we can see it. It's heading off out towards the south and the east from us. It looks like a bright star now in the evening sky, and again, a testimony of the clear night that has developed here. But again, it's like a beautiful star out there right now, heading off up into orbit, on its way to orbit.
Beautiful red, yellow, and orange pictures, John Zarella. While the shuttle continues to increase its speed, we're going to replay the launch for our viewers around the world.
2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Discovery now on its way to service NASA's Hubble Space Telescope.
Houston now controlling.
We're all programmed, Houston.
Roger, roll, Discovery. Roll maneuver is complete. Position on course for a 28.5 degree, 309 nautical mile orbit. Discovery already...
I'm John Holloman in Atlanta. Stay tuned in the United States for Burden of Proof and world news for our international viewers. Thanks for watching.
This has been a CNN Live event.
Die US-Raumfähre Discovery ist zu einer heiklen Mission ins All gestartet. Das 6,6 Milliarden Mark teure Hubble-Teleskop soll technisch auf den neuesten Stand gebracht werden. Die Aktion ist riskant, weil es den 7 Astronauten beim ersten Anlauf gelingen muss, das 11,5 Tonnen schwere Weltraumteleskop mit einem Fangarm einzuholen. Für einen zweiten Versuch hat die Discovery nicht genug Treibstoff an Bord. Mit den neuen Kameras kann Hubble Galaxien sehen, die 10 Milliarden Lichtjahre entfernt sind.
Der Weltraum, unendliche Weiten. Genau dahin ist wieder einmal die US-Raumfähre Discovery aufgebrochen. Seit nunmehr 16 Jahren ist sie mit ihren Schwester-Space Shuttles auf Abenteuerkurs. Nicht ganz so oft wie ihr berühmtes Vorbild, das Raumschiff Enterprise, aber inzwischen immerhin alle 6 Wochen. Diesmal geht's zu einem alten Bekannten. Hubble heißt die Wundertüte der Astronomen. Das Weltraumteleskop hat ihnen schier atemberaubende Bilder zur Erde gefunkt. Allerdings, bevor es so richtig in Gang kam, musste es 1993 erstmal repariert werden. Im Weltraum. Die Shuttle-Astronauten lösten die Aufgabe damals mit Bravour. Übermorgen sollen sie Hubble wieder einfangen. Diesmal gibt's neue, bessere Kameras für das Teleskop. Hubble ist dabei nur eine von vielen Erfolgsmeldungen der Space-Shuttle-Geschichte. Mehr als 200 Menschen haben sie ins All buxiert, dazu Dutzende Satelliten. Insgesamt mehrere tausend Tonnen Ladung. Dabei hatte es noch 1986 so ausgesehen, als sei alles vorbei. Challenger, die größte Katastrophe der Raumfahrtgeschichte, kostete 7 Menschen das Leben. Amerika, jahrelang erfolgverwöhnt, fiel in eine tiefe Raumfahrtlethargie. Das Programm wurde gestoppt. Fast 3 Jahre Zwangspause, um Sicherheitsstandards zu überarbeiten. Schließlich ging es aber doch weiter und seit Anfang der 90er sogar gemeinsam mit dem ehemaligen Konkurrenten Russland. Die Shuttles fliegen zur Raumstation Mir, ein erster Schritt zu einer geplanten internationalen Raumbasis. 2003 soll das ehrgeizige Projekt fertig sein. Ein Sprungbrett in die unendlichen Weiten des Weltraums.
Ignition and liftoff. Discovery now on its...
After the shuttle catches up with the orbiting telescope Thursday, astronauts will begin repairs. They'll install upgraded equipment on 4 separate spacewalks. The U.S. Space Agency says it's one of the most difficult missions. More information from CNN Interactive. World Wide Web users can go to CNN.com and see updates on the mission as well as live pictures.
Now, as we showed you at the top of the show, the U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery is on its way up. CNN's John Holloman joins us now with details on the mission and its crew. John.
Well, Fiona, I'll tell you, it was a beautiful launch, and I think viewers really like to see the pictures of a space shuttle lifting off. It is so powerful. My colleague, CNN's Miami Bureau Chief John Zarella, is going to join us and comment. He was on the ground near the launch pad as the shuttle went off. There it goes. John, what were you feeling? What were you seeing when the shuttle left?
Well, John, you know, initially you see the shuttle and the entire launch pad lights up and the sky around it really turns to day. It's just an absolutely staggering sight. And then you hear it. And then, as those shock waves roll across the 4+ miles from the launch pad to where we are here at the CNN compound, you finally begin to feel it. It rolls across the ground and then across the lagoon and here, and then the deck we're standing on, the wooden deck, begins to shake, and the car alarms begin to go off in the parking lot. Many, many car alarms. The sensors, of course, set off by those shock waves and by the noise of it. And I know earlier when you were trying to talk with me live during the launch, I could barely hear what you were saying because of the loudness of it. It's just a fascinating sight and something that's spectacular to see and to witness and feel. Of course, you know, I feel very, very fortunate to have seen about 50 of these launches firsthand going back into the very early 80s, and every one of them is a treat, no less exciting than the very first one I saw. John?
All right, John Zarella, thanks a lot. If you're on the ground, Fiona, and you're hearing this first, it's almost impossible to describe, but it sounds to your ears like the space shuttle is ripping apart the atmosphere. It's like taking an old linen bed sheet and just ripping it down the middle as this thing goes up through the atmosphere to make it into orbit. Shuttle is in orbit, by the way. It is traveling at about 30,000 kilometers per hour right now. It is over, the last picture I saw showed that it was over Africa. And the item that it is looking for, the Hubble Space Telescope, which I have ensconced on my tie as well as in a model here on our desk, this is the goal. This is what the shuttle astronauts are going to be walking around on in about 45 hours from right now. It was over Africa when the shuttle left from Florida. It is now over the Pacific, and the shuttle will be playing tag with this for the next couple of days, day at least. What we'll be watching first is when the shuttle hooks up with the telescope. I'll attempt to do this. Well, I'll just show you. These are pictures from the last mission when Story Musgrave, Kathy Thornton, two other astronauts, Jeff Hoffman, were outside opening these doors on the side of the telescope and removing huge pieces of equipment, the equipment the size of telephone booths, and weighing some 800 pounds in English measure, and pulling them out and carrying them around because in space they weigh nothing, but they have mass, and so it is difficult to maneuver these things that happen out in space. It is just an amazing thing. The telescope, after this repair mission 3 years ago, provided some of the most spectacular pictures from space that human beings have ever seen. This is an actual picture taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. There's a spiral galaxy you can see spinning in space. This is from, I think, the Horseheads Nebula. This is something from the Eagle Nebula that some of our viewers saw amazing things in, which weren't confirmed by astronomers. But this is where stars are born. One of the new instruments that's going to be added to the Hubble this time will be able to get even closer into this, they call it a stellar nursery, and see more about the process of how stars are formed. What a thing. What an amazing thing for people down here on Earth to be able to do. And the spacewalks, as you just saw, are going to be as dramatic as those from 3 or 4 years ago. It will be a fun picture show for our viewers all through the next week. We plan extensive live coverage here on CNN International. We have the best team of commentators we can get. 2 of the astronauts you saw doing the spacewalks just now will be with us live on CNN International to explain what is going on outside, because they, of course, remember. So it'll be big fun.
Great. Well, we'll be watching, John. Thanks very much indeed for all that. Thank you. And for those of you with access to the internet, you can learn more about the shuttle launch and many of our other stories. CNN has an extensive site on the World Wide Web, and we cover a variety of international news, health, science and entertainment stories. For a multimedia look at the news, go to CNN Interactive at cnn.com.
An Bord der amerikanischen Raumfähre Discovery bereiten sich die 7 Astronauten auf ihre Arbeit am Weltraumteleskop Hubble vor. Sie überprüfen ihre Spezialanzüge und Werkzeuge für die bevorstehende Wartung. Außerdem testeten sie den ferngesteuerten Greifarm, mit dem das Teleskop in der Ladebucht der Raumfähre festgemacht werden soll. Der Beginn der Modernisierungsarbeiten an Hubble ist für morgen geplant.
Die 7 Astronauten der amerikanischen Raumfähre Discovery haben ihre Vorbereitungen für die 1,3 Milliarden Mark teuren Reparaturarbeiten an dem Weltraumteleskop Hubble abgeschlossen. In der Nacht testeten sie den ferngesteuerten Greifarm des Raumgleiters. Mit diesem Arm soll das Superfernrohr heute Vormittag eingefangen werden. Dabei müssen die Astronauten besonders vorsichtig sein, damit sie die 2 großen Solarflügel von Hubble nicht beschädigen. In den nächsten 4 Tagen sollen die Astronauten 2 neue Kameras in das Teleskop einbauen und Verschleißteile austauschen.
For the astronauts who have been training for 2 years to fix the Hubble Space Telescope, the news could not have been better. They got to the telescope about 15 minutes late, and Steve Hawley, known to his friends as Dr. Stevie, the astronaut brought back from NASA management to operate the robot arm, was able to gently attach the shuttle to the telescope and bring it down into the cargo bay.
Houston, Discovery. Go ahead, Discovery. Yeah, I wish you could see the expression on Dr. Stevie's face. Looks like he just shook hands with an old friend. And we watched it from down here, Sox. It was certainly an absolute thrill for us to see it on television, and congratulations to all of you for an outstanding rendezvous and a great capture. We're looking forward to getting out there and starting to work on that telescope. Yeah, us too, Mark. We went a little slow there at the end. We just wanted to make the rendezvous last longer. It was so much fun.
Until now, no human has seen the telescope for 3 years, when astronauts left it after the last repair mission. So astronomers, engineers, and ground-based managers want to go over every square inch to find out how life in space 300 miles above the Earth has affected Hubble. Coming up, 4 spacewalks starting Thursday night to replace instruments aboard the telescope with updated versions. The result of this should be a more efficient operating telescope, which can bring to Earth even more pictures like the ones that made the telescope famous. John Holloman, CNN reporting.
We'll have live coverage of one of those walks out to the telescope. You can see it live from space at the times shown on your screen.
Die Raumfähre Discovery hat das Weltraumteleskop Hubble eingefangen. Das Gerät soll im Frachtraum des Shuttle überholt werden. Das fliegende Observatorium ist seit 1990 im All.
Their 6-hour planned walk was delayed by a problem involving the orbiting telescope they're trying to service. Joining us now with the details is CNN's John Holloman. John.
Leon, that problem several hours ago seems like small potatoes now, because the astronauts were able, after a delay of about an hour and a half, to begin their spacewalk. It is progressing fabulously from everything we can see and hear from space. We've got some pictures that were originally broadcast live by the shuttle crew about 5-6 minutes ago, as 2 astronauts, Steve Smith, who you see on the right, and Mark Lee, who you see apparently lying on his side behind Smith, are beginning the job of removing one of the 2 main instruments from the Hubble Space Telescope. Joining us on the phone is former Hubble Space Telescope repair woman, Kathy Thornton, former NASA astronaut, now college professor at the University of Virginia. Kathy, the spacewalk itself has been in progress for nearly 2 hours now. I'd like you to not only talk about what you could see on the television about the progress of the spacewalk, but as an astronaut who has done it, put us inside that spacesuit with either one of those astronauts and tell us what it feels like to be out there in space.
Well, it's kind of an interesting feeling. The suits are a lot stiffer than the ones that we train in, because the training ones have been used a lot, and they're kind of like old worn-out tennis shoes. So my first impression was, gee, the suit's a lot stiffer, and I hope I can do what I promised to do. They are right now very busy trying to get the first instrument out and just thinking about what their next hand has to do. They're probably not taking much time to look around, but just thinking about every single small task they have to do and make sure they do it with perfection.
Now, you get 6 hours on the outside. Why is it limited to about that amount of time?
It's limited by the length that the suit can support people, and there's a lot of margin in that. I know that we have had spacewalks as long as 8 hours, so that there is some margin if they need it. but there are consumables in there, which are oxygen, there's power from a battery, and there's carbon dioxide removal cartridge that has a limited lifetime.
So at the beginning of a spacewalk, at least, you don't have time to do what every astronaut I've ever talked to has told me is the most fun thing of this job, which is to look out the window. If you get the hard work done early, is there a chance to look out without having to look through a window toward the end as you're cleaning up?
I certainly hope they get an opportunity to do that. It's probably a little easier for Steve because he's on the arm and he can look up. For Mark, his handholds are always down with relation to the shuttle payload, so that's the way his face is moving, is pointing most of the time. But I hope they'll get a chance just to look around and enjoy the view.
Yeah, as far as the training for this goes, Mark Lee was telling me, I guess about a month ago, that he had a personal trainer who helped him develop the muscles in his fingers and his hand. Is that the hardest, is that the thing that is the most sore at the end of a spacewalk for the average astronaut?
I think that depends on the tasks that you're doing. Some of their tasks are very hand-intensive, and it's important to get that kind of strength either through training in the gym or through lots of training in the water tank. Other spacewalks aren't so intensive. The muscles that I recall being sore after my time on the end of the arm were the ones on the front of my shin, because that's the muscles that try to hold you in place as you push against the telescope. The telescope, of course, is pushing you back. The only muscles that can react that are the ones that allow you to flex your foot.
All right, Kathy, thanks a lot for joining us. Also with us, Dick Miller, astronomer at Georgia State University. Dick, we've only got about a half-minute left, I'm told, and I apologize for giving you short shrift here, but as you have watched this repair mission, how does it appear to be going to you?
This repair mission seems to be going extraordinarily well. They had the small problem with the one solar panel, but they have corrected that, and things seem now to be going precisely as they had planned. So I think this is going to work out very well now.
All right, Dick Miller, thanks a lot. We'll be back with you throughout the next several hours as the spacewalk continues, so we urge you to stay with us.
Die Astronauten der US-Raumfähre Discovery haben ihren ersten Arbeitsausflug zum Weltraumteleskop Hubble begonnen. Verzögert wurde der Einsatz, da sich einer der Solarflügel des Observatoriums verschoben hatte. Zunächst muss der Flügel auf mögliche Schäden untersucht werden. Die Astronauten sollen hochmoderne Infrarotkameras an Hubble installieren.
This first walk, which had been running ahead of schedule, was delayed at the last minute as the astronauts prepared to service the Hubble Space Telescope. One of its solar panels unexpectedly moved. The two had to wait in an airlock while engineers back on Earth decided whether to proceed. And stay with CNN for live coverage of the ongoing spacewalk by those astronauts. Our coverage begins about an hour from now.
Hello and welcome. I'm John Holloman at CNN Center. Astronauts Mark Lee and Steve Smith have been outside in Discovery's cargo bay for about the past 3 hours, replacing two of the most important pieces of the Hubble Space Telescope. The spacewalkers have already replaced a spectrograph with an improved version, and they're in the process of adding a new infrared camera to the telescope. We'll take you live into space for some of the spacewalk, but we want to bring you up to date on the drama of the event from the past few hours. The spacewalkers decided to try to begin their work 2 hours early this evening by getting into the airlock ahead of schedule. But when they released air pressure from the airlock out into the cargo bay, a strange thing happened. One of the two solar panels on the telescope began to turn wildly and had to be stopped by a computer command from Hubble's onboard computer. That worried mission managers. The astronauts, still inside Discovery, used a handheld spotlight to look around the solar panel for engineers and scientists back on the ground.
Was that entire incident only took about 15 seconds, and the crew did not note any undue deflections in the bistems.
When ground controllers first saw the telescope, they were amazed. The left side solar panel was in place, the proper position, parallel to the base of the shuttle, but the one on the right, which you're looking at there, was tilted too close to the astronauts' workspace. After the airlock was vented again, the solar panel was steered back to its normal position, and the astronauts could finally come outside, and come outside they did.
Flipping at 7, I think it's enough turns. And you're almost to the soft stop.
7.
After opening the latches on the two huge doors at the bottom of the telescope, the first job on the outside was to set up the workspace, putting all the tools for the week into the cargo bay, stabilizing the telescope with a support bar to keep it from jiggling as the astronauts worked on it. Then to the major mission, opening those two huge doors on the base of the telescope and removing the science instruments.
Doors just sprung open. Sure did. About that. Are we in altitude? Yeah, we're close enough. I can go get that door if you want. Just leave it out there. Okay. How about that? Yeah, let's see how this one.
In this picture, you see astronaut Mark Lee at the bottom of your screen, literally climbing inside the space telescope, while his partner, Steve Smith, remained perched on the shuttle's robot arm with a terrific tool chest there to help him conduct the various operations that needed to be done on the telescope.
It's very scuffed, I guess that's what they call it, scuffed. Say there's scuff marks on the plates? On the bottom of the sheet. Okay. Is it binding in the shear plate much? Oh, no, not at all. This door is real good. Steve, when that right door opened, did it just sort of spring out of your hand when you released the handle? Well, actually it was, I was probably a foot and a half out when it finally came out.
The astronauts worked for more than an hour to unplug all the connectors on the Goddard high-resolution spectrograph, which failed about 2 weeks ago. It took until a half hour ago to get that instrument out of place, the new replacement instrument mounted and in place. And the astronauts right now are working on the second instrument. As we continue to watch them work on the telescope, we're joined by a panel of experts. Joining us from Charlottesville, Virginia, former astronaut Kathy Thornton, who made history and a beautiful picture on the last Hubble repair mission. You can see Kathy there as she released one of the two solar panels, a broken solar panel, into its own orbit. It was one of the most dramatic views that we have ever seen in the history of manned spaceflight in this world. And Kathy is no longer a NASA astronaut, now a college professor in Charlottesville, Virginia. She'll be with us in just a couple of minutes. And with us at CNN Center are two astronomers who are intimately familiar with the telescope and what it can and can't do. From the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore, Mike Shara, and from Georgia State University in Atlanta, Dick Miller. During the last Hubble repair mission, Dick was in charge of solving the problems which occurred to some science instruments as they were repaired and replaced by the astronauts. We'll be back with more of our live coverage of the Hubble Space Telescope repair mission in just a moment. Stay with CNN.
The tasks. Thank you. Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, let's go put one away here. And back off a half a turn. Still not loose.
As we told you before the short break there, we have a panel of really experts with us, one of whom has already been out in space and worked on the Hubble Space Telescope, Kathy Thornton, and with us in the studio, two astronomers who have used this telescope or helped to make it work better. If you'd like to email us with some questions for our panel of guests, I'm going to give you my email address. It's pretty simple. It's john.holloman@turner.com, and you can send me some email. I've got a computer here which will let you question our guests as well as having those of us in the room here ask them questions. And what we're going to show you next on television is some pictures that came down live from space about an hour ago as the astronauts were replacing one of the instruments inside the Hubble Space Telescope and looking around, showing the solar panels on the telescope. Kathy Thornton, I'd like to bring you into this part of our discussion. This was at a point when the astronauts were having a little trouble getting the instrument that they were plugging into the telescope, the new replacement instrument, centered. Is there much pressure, is there much tension or emotion as you're working on a project like this when it doesn't work quite right?
Well, I think when you run out of options, there's a lot of pressure, but they were working at it systematically, moving it around a little bit here, a little bit there, until it finally came into place, and I don't think they had any I would hope they didn't have any real serious concerns that it was going to go in.
Yeah, well, it certainly is in now, and they've taken the old instrument and moved it into its storage container in the shuttle's cargo bay. At this moment, the combination of the shuttle and the space telescope are out of direct communication with the ground, so we can't see any pictures at this moment. We hope as this half-hour special continues, we'll have some more live pictures. We'll look at these most recent pictures that we have as the astronauts continue to do this very technical job of work in installing the telescope, and bring in our other guests to see what they can tell us about what the telescope is going to be able to do differently that it wasn't able to do before. Dick Miller, we've talked about this before in the evening, but let's talk about the two new instruments and what sorts of capabilities they're going to have, not only for those of you who are professional astronomers, but for just average folks on the ground who like to see pretty pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope.
Well, certainly the two new instruments on HST will provide us with astounding capabilities, I think. In the case of NICMOS, you will have a capability in the infrared that you've not previously had. It will allow us to do imaging in the infrared. It will allow us to look at star-forming regions in a different wavelength region than we've been able to view it before. We will be able to look at clusters of galaxies, and we'll be able to establish distances that new ways of determining distances to these clusters. And determining distances is one of the more fundamental questions that astronomers try to address. So I think this is a very important point that NICMOS will be able to help us with.
And if you know distance, you know something about time as well, right?
You know something about time, you know about the intrinsic brightnesses of the objects, and that tells you something about what's fundamentally going on with those objects.
Yeah, and to me, one of the fascinating things about this that I still don't understand, Mike Shera and I talked about it 3 years ago on the last Hubble repair. How do you know when the universe started? I still don't get it. Can either of you help me figure that out, and how the telescope is going to help us know when it all started?
Well, we're going to be able to look a lot further back, both in space and in time, than we have before. We certainly want to be able to see the very first generations of stars and galaxies, and by using both NICMOS and STS to take very, very deep pictures, we're going to be able to do that. The telescope is, in some sense, a time machine. What it does is look very, very far back, and we can see the very first generations of stars forming and see the processes by which stars and star clusters amalgamate into galaxies. This is something we very much want to do.
Yeah, Dick, you want to add something to that?
Well, one of the other things that we will be able to see is what's the structure of these early galaxies that we see? Are they different from what we see in basically the current epoch of the universe? Do these host things like quasars, perhaps supermassive black holes, which lie at the heart of these objects? We may be able to develop new evidence to really show that these very massive superluminous objects are associated with these supermassive black holes. So I think there are enormous kinds of problems that we'll be able to address and be very, very interesting results for us.
Did we know there were planets around other stars before the Hubble Space Telescope was able to show us that?
We certainly suspected that there were, but we didn't have any hard evidence. In the last few years, astronomers using very, very clever techniques, mostly ground-based, have been able to find wiggles or wobbles in the movement of several nearby stars, which prove almost beyond any doubt that there are objects like Jupiter orbiting about half a dozen nearby stars. We've been able to take pictures of some nearby stars with Hubble Space Telescope also that show that there are brown dwarfs, that is, stars that have just failed to become stars. They're not quite massive enough. And so there's something intermediate between stars and planets.
And there's some amazing things out there, Mike. I don't know if you can see this picture. This is a cartwheel galaxy that was seen by Hubble. What does that tell you that we didn't know before?
Well, this is a beautiful example of a collision between two galaxies. The length of time that this collision takes is enormous. It's 100 million years. The object in the center is actually dismembering the object around it. It's the central part of one galaxy that's running through another. And the ring that you see there is a whole bunch of new stars that have been set off in the former picture. In this image, which is the central part of the first picture, what you see are comma-shaped objects on the top and near the bottom of the image, which are probably giant regions of gas and molecular clouds that have been stretched out by the impact with other gas in the first galaxy. So you have two galaxies running through each other, disrupting each other, and changing the shapes, the morphologies, and the kind of galaxies they are. This is how galaxies evolve. It's a little bit like biological evolution. We start out with one kind of galaxy and end up with something that's completely different.
There are so many fascinating pictures from the Space Telescope. This is yet another one. And is this the Lagoon Nebula?
This one is. It's also a region of star formation. What's particularly fascinating in this picture is that there are some tornado-like objects that are in the upper left part of this picture. We're not really sure what causes them, but there are very strong pressure and perhaps temperature differences between different parts of the nebula. Here's a close-up. And these tunnel-like or funnel-like things that are there might in some ways be analogous to tornadoes on Earth. Certainly these beautiful structures are caused by the fact that you have a very bright star in the bottom right corner of the image now that's evaporating a lot of the material in the nebula, leaving behind other areas that haven't evaporated. That's what's causing the contrast in the picture. We would very much like to know more about the velocity structure, the speed of material moving around there, and that's something that STS is going to help us to do.
Now, a little bit before we're still looking at this picture, is there any way to tell what the dark stuff is in that picture versus the light, sort of baby blue stuff in the middle?
Sure. The best way to do that is by taking spectra. That is, take the light from the dark areas and the light in the bright areas, break it up with a prism into its constituent colors, and see if there are characteristic lines that tell us both what the chemical composition is, what's the gas and stuff they're made of, and also how fast it's moving. When we get those two pieces of information, we can figure out the dynamics, the history, where this thing came from and where it's going.
All right. Dick, as a scientist and an astronomer, what do we know about what is out there so far away from our planet?
In regions like this, we know that we have clearly have dense clouds of gas and dust, and certainly hydrogen is one of the dominant gases that you would expect to be there. But you will also find molecular clouds will be present there. In other words, clouds which will have molecules as opposed to atoms. They're somewhat cooler, and that's an indication that you have star formation, a site for star formation occurring.
Yeah, intergalactic astronomy is your, or extragalactic astronomy is your strong suit. As you teach your classes, as you try to learn more about this, does your gut tell you there is going to be some sort of intelligence out there based on the law of averages or anything else that you know, has come across your desk in your years of study?
Well, I think that you are almost certain to have life somewhere in the universe, but I think you're almost equally likely to have very little chance of actually finding that life because of the vastness of the universe.
But the fact that Hubble is up there and working as well as it is might help us, I guess. I mean,
that's true.
The fact we used it to find planets. Okay, we're going to take another break. We'll come back with Kathy Thornton, our two astronomers, with some of your questions if you have them. And we urge you to get in touch. John.Holloman at Turner.com. Welcome back to CNN's live coverage of the Hubble repair mission. I'm John Holloman, joined by a panel of experts from all over. As I'm sure you realize, the cable news network pays a lot more attention to space exploration than a lot of people in the TV news business do. And now that we've got our own homepage on the internet, we have another way, another place for you to look. we've come up with something for this shuttle mission called the Discovery Hubble Digital Theater. You can see it, the homepage for that scrolling up on your screen. And if you want to look in on that, you can get it at CNN.com. I'm going to be doing a live broadcast a little bit later today from the middle of the CNN Interactive newsroom, and you can get a look around at our interactive home place here in the CNN Center. The Hubble repair mission is continuing underway. At this moment, NASA is not able to provide us with any live pictures, but we have some more pictures from about an hour ago when the two astronauts, Steve Smith and, forgive me, a little brain death here, Mark Lee, outside of the Hubble Space Telescope, continuing to work on it. At this point, Smith, who was at the end of the robot arm, was getting moved around physically by astronaut Steve Hawley, who is inside the space shuttle, and he is basically a pawn in the hands of Hawley, giving him commands to move around 6 inches to the left or 12 inches up or whatever. Kathy Thornton, you've been at the end of the robot arm, probably both ends of it. What is it like to be in that position for a mission like this?
It's very comfortable. There's almost no sensation of being moved around unless you're holding something fairly massive like these instruments or like the solar arrays. At other times, if you're not paying attention to being moved around, you can sort of get lost because the last view you had of the world, where you were in a certain orientation, if the next time you look up, you've rolled over 90 degrees or you've turned around backwards, it takes a second or two just to get your bearings.
Yeah. Is this the best job for an astronaut, getting to do a spacewalk?
I think so. I think there'll be a lot more of them coming along with the International Space Station, and so it won't be quite as unusual to do that. But it's an awful lot of fun.
What is so special about it? Is it the chance to look around without thick window glass between you and the outside?
Well, I think it's partly that. It's partly that there just haven't been very many of them in the history of the space program. So it makes it a little bit different, but the view is spectacular, and it's much better than what you get inside.
No kidding. Well, it's certainly the view that we get from those cameras in the cargo bay, the payload bay of the shuttle, are always fabulous. And earlier this evening, we were able to see some pictures with the Earth beneath the shuttle, showing just how stunning this planet is and just how stunning it is for these astronauts to be outside working on the telescope. We're almost out of time for our special. A half hour certainly goes fast when you're having fun and have good guests. Gentlemen, the two astronomers here in Atlanta, what is the best thing that you anticipate we're going to get from the Hubble Space Telescope over the next 3 or 4 years with these new instruments installed and working?
I'm going to guess that we're going to get exquisite pictures of the very first galaxies. I think that with NICMOS we can get tremendously deep pictures of galaxies turning on, of stars turning on for the very first time at very, very high redshifts, at enormous distances from the Earth. And I'm really looking forward to that. If you'll forgive me a second one, I think we're also going to get by far much, much better information about supermassive black holes, objects 1 billion times as massive as the Sun sitting in the centers of galaxies. That's something that this is going to do an exquisite job on.
Rick Miller?
Well, I agree that certainly the early most galaxies that we see in the universe are going to be very important. But I think one of the other things that we will see as well is that when we look into some of these clusters of galaxies that are not too far away from us, we're going to be able to see much more detail in terms of the structure of these galaxies. We'll be able to see tremendous evidence for interactions. And we know that these strong tidal interactions that we see, at least in some instances between galaxies, actually may trigger some of the activity that's associated with the nuclei of active galaxies. So I think these will be important things that will also we'll get really quite new insights into.
Yeah, well, it's going to be fun to continue to watch this activity as it unfolds over the next 2 or maybe 3 hours this morning and over the next 3 or 4 days. The astronauts would, of course, like to do a 5th spacewalk. They are scheduled to do 4. And the way this one is going tonight, it appears that the 2 major jobs of the astronauts is going to be accomplished at this point. And for our viewers who have sent email messages, I just found the right button to get them. And for the 45 of you who have sent me email questions, I will try to get them answered over the next few days. And we'll have expert guests with us throughout this 4-day mission. Kathy Thornton has graciously agreed to give us astronaut perspective tonight. And on Saturday night, we'll have astronaut Story Musgrave, who is providing mission commentary for NASA this evening, to be with us tomorrow evening and Sunday evening for the last of the 4 spacewalks. So we'll have a lot of smart people here to answer your questions. Thanks for watching us at this hour. We'll be back with more as the spacewalk continues.
This has been a CNN Live event.
Das Weltraumteleskop Hubble kann jetzt besser sehen als je zuvor. Bei ihrem ersten 6-stündigen Ausflug ins All haben 2 Astronauten der Raumfähre Discovery einen sogenannten Spektrographen installiert, mit dem Hubble schwarze Löcher sichten und neue Sterne beobachten kann. Außerdem eine Infrarotkamera, die kosmische Staubwolken durchdringt. Noch 3 weitere Weltraumspaziergänge und Hubble ist technisch für das nächste Jahrtausend gerüstet.
Ausflug im All. 2 Astronauten der Raumfähre Discovery sind heute zum ersten Mal ausgestiegen, um das Weltraumteleskop Hubble aufzurüsten. Auf einem Roboterarm näherten sie sich Hubble in einer Höhe von knapp 600 Kilometern über der Erde. Die Astronauten bauten 2 neue Kameras ein. Eine Infrarotkamera erlaubt bei der Suche nach den Sternen tiefere Blicke ins All. Ein Spektrograph, so groß wie ein Kühlschrank, soll der Erforschung der sogenannten schwarzen Löcher dienen.
A delicate dance with the ugly duckling of astronomy. Born deformed, the Hubble telescope is still ungainly, but it has far surpassed expectations, inspiring research and even a measure of rapture. Now a repair job that might just blight its inner beauty all over again. Hello and welcome. It's a long, hard job on a very expensive piece of equipment in an astoundingly difficult place to work. Not only that, but if they make a mistake, it may cost millions of dollars, disappoint thousands of people, and alter the course of modern astronomy. With that mission in mind, a team of astronauts set to work on the Hubble Space Telescope. As machines go, it's already had more adventure than most. CNN's Jason Evans reports.
It was in the late 1970s that scientists first started talking about putting a telescope up in space. They thought they could get a better look at the universe if their view was not obscured by the Earth's atmosphere. But it took until 1990 for that idea to become a reality. That's when NASA launched the Hubble Space Telescope.
2, 1, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery with the Hubble Space Telescope, our window on the universe.
As tall as a 4-story building and weighing more than 10,000 kilograms, it was supposed to bring us pictures of the universe never seen before. Instead, we got pictures that looked like they were taken with an out-of-focus camera. A problem with its lens made the Hubble virtually useless, producing mostly blurred images. Scientists started talking about the Hubble as a $2 billion waste of money. But NASA was not ready to give up. In 1993, a repair mission was launched. In effect, the Hubble was given a pair of glasses that fixed the blurriness problem. And the result was amazing. Pictures which had been undecipherable now became crystal clear. Hubble became a star of the scientific community. It calculated the age of the universe, confirmed the existence of black holes, took the first pictures of the surface of Pluto, and even found that planets are much more common than we once thought. Thousands of scientists now stare at its pictures to learn the truths of the universe. Demand for pictures from Hubble is so great that only 1 in 10 requests can be filled. Now, astronauts are again in space, making repairs and fine-tuning the Hubble telescope. Some say, why mess with a good thing? Why risk creating problems by fiddling with the telescope? But NASA says it wants to make Hubble even better, to give us an even clearer picture of the universe around us. Jason Evans, CNN reporting.
For a better idea now of just what's going on up there around the Hubble telescope and why anyone is bothering, we're joined by Simon Goodwin, an astronomer doing research at the University of Sussex in England. Thanks so much for being with us. Let me ask you, first of all, the Hubble was a terribly expensive piece of equipment to put up into space. Is it worth it? What kind of work does it do for people like you?
It's done an awful lot for astronomy in general, from everything from telling us about how the universe exists and how it started, to planets and showing us how things are formed.
Are the repairs that are undergoing, that the telescope is undergoing now, something that astronomers have been clamoring for? You personally, in your work, is this going to make a big difference?
I think it is going to make a big difference, yes. The new instruments that they're putting on are going to vastly increase what the Hubble Space Telescope can do. Two new instruments, NICMOS and STS, are going to show us an awful lot more about the universe, and hopefully we can get as fantastic a new view of the universe as the old instruments gave us.
That's if it goes right. We're joined now by Pat Dash of the National Space Society from here in the United States. Let me ask you, in layman's terms, what are the astronauts actually doing to the Hubble Space Telescope, and how risky is it?
What they're doing is changing out some instruments, giving it a health check, bringing one or two things up to date. And how risky is it? This is pretty much at the limits of what we think it's safe for them to do outside. There is a good deal of risk involved.
When you say at the limit of what is safe and a good deal of risk involved, who is the risk to? Is it to the astronauts or to the telescope itself?
Primarily, I would say it's to the astronauts. We simply don't have a great deal of experience in working outside in space, and these are very big pieces of equipment that they're handling. The biggest will actually be dealt with in tonight's spacewalk. Last night's were pretty big, and they're out for a long time, and they can get very, very tired because it's arduous work in that spacesuit, and they can get very cold.
Well, let me ask you about that, because we're looking at pictures now. It looks pretty nice out there. Everyone's floating around. It looks kind of bucolic. What are the physical constraints? What are the physical difficulties of doing that kind of work?
The difficulties are that although we've done a lot to improve the spacesuits over the years, they're still rather heavy and cumbersome, and the gloves they wear don't really offer them too much dexterity. And for example, tomorrow they have to take some screws out of instruments, and they have to do something similar the night after. It's not easy to handle small things like screws in those suits, and the last thing we want is a few screws floating off into the instruments.
Well, what would happen and how serious would it be if the repair work went wrong, and how big a risk is there of that?
Well, obviously, the astronauts have rehearsed and rehearsed. We expect them to be outside for about 25 hours during this mission in 4 spacewalks. They've spent 250 hours in the big tanks at Marshall and at the Johnson Space Center rehearsing. So they think they've got everything covered. But if anything goes wrong, they have their contingency plans. Depending on where the problem was, if there was a problem for an astronaut or a problem with the shuttle, they would get those spacewalkers inside as fast as they could, and they would either jettison the Hubble, which is a last-case scenario. Hopefully they could secure it and then stabilize the situation. But believe me, they have worked through numerous scenarios, and as the administrator emphasized in his last interview with the astronauts, which I had the opportunity to sit in on, crew safety is the absolute priority.
Simon Goodwin, are astronomers like yourself biting their nails right now, waiting to see how this all turns out?
I think so, certainly. I mean, we're hoping that it all works well, because if it does, then the Hubble Space Telescope is going to be able to do so much more than it used to be able to do. And if we were to lose such a vital part of the astronomical arsenal, then it would put a dent in a lot of research projects.
Simon Goodwin, astronomer, and Pat Dash of the National Space Society. We're going to ask you both to stay with us. We have to take a break. But when we come back, a closer look at some of the pictures from Hubble and what they tell us. Duck away. Welcome back. The images sent back to Earth from Hubble have taught us many things about the universe, about its age, its composition, even about some of the myths and theories that we've always believed but never knew why. But what exactly does the Hubble see, and how does it see it? Once again, we're joined by astronomer and author Simon Goodwin and science writer Pat Dash. Pat Dash, if we could start with you, why did they call it Hubble?
Good question. It's named after Edwin Hubble, an astronomer who first suggested that it would be a good idea to put a telescope up above the atmosphere of the Earth, and he suggested that in about 1940.
What difference does it make where the telescope is?
There's a lot of gunk in our atmosphere. Even if it was a pure atmosphere, it stops you seeing out to the heavens. It's much clearer if you're above our atmosphere.
Okay, let's have a look at some of the things that Hubble has enabled us to see without that intervening filter. Simon Goodwin, we have a whole bunch of photographs that are drawn from your book, Come to Us from Space. What are we looking at here now?
At the moment, we're looking at the Orion Nebula, which you can actually see with the naked eye. But the amazing thing that Hubble's allowed us to see is that a lot of the very, very young stars in this nebula actually have around them a disk of dust and gas, which we assume is what planets are made of. And we think that our own sun at one time had disks of gas like this around it.
Now, we're looking at a photograph here that was taken relatively recently, but Simon Goodwin, what date could we give, if any? What idea do we have about the events that are in this photograph, the things we're looking at? How old are they?
Well, the cloud itself is about 15,000 light years away, so what we're seeing is events that happened 15,000 years ago. And the stars in the nebula itself are probably about 300,000 years old. It sounds like a long time, but astronomically, they're very, very young objects.
Let's go on to the next picture. I think this is the Eagle Nebula, is that right?
Yeah, that's the Eagle Nebula, and this is one of the most spectacular pictures that the Hubble has given us. And in this picture, we can see stars in the very process of being born.
These are, I take it, very powerful explosions we're looking at. We can see how bright they are. How much noise would they be making?
Well, they're not actually explosions. What's happening is that dust and gas in a large gas cloud is getting blown away by the strength of the radiation from very, very hot stars. And the thought of noise in space doesn't make a lot of sense, really, because there's no atmosphere as such.
So it's terribly bright, terribly powerful, and terribly quiet. We're going to go from a birthday now to a funeral. This is, I take it, the death of a star. What are we looking at?
This is a star which is 100, maybe even 150 times as massive as our own sun. And a star that big burns its nuclear fuel incredibly rapidly. And what you can see in this picture is that the burning of the fuel is so intense that it's just blowing away the outer edges of the star in this incredible nebula. And soon, maybe in a few million years, this star will go supernova and will become millions of times brighter than it is even now.
Another picture, this one of an entire galaxy. I think we can go to it. There it is. What are we looking at?
That's the galaxy M100. Now, this is a very important thing that the Hubble has looked at. It's been able to look at this galaxy, which is a long way away, and in it actually see individual stars. And the individual stars it's seen are known as Cepheid variables. And if you can see how their brightness changes, you can actually tell how far away they are. And this allows us to get a distance to this galaxy of around 56 million light years. And once we get a distance to a lot of galaxies like this, then we can actually start finding out how old the universe is and how large it is, and getting clues to the final fate of the universe, whether it'll carry on forever or whether one day it might actually implode on itself.
Does this galaxy look anything like our own? Is this a good estimation for where we live?
It's very similar to our own Milky Way, yes. It's a lot bigger, but if we were to stand outside our own galaxy, it's very similar to what we would see then.
One more picture to look at. This one is of a black hole. Tell us what we're seeing and why it isn't black.
Well, what you're actually looking at isn't the black hole. As the name implies, you can't actually see a black hole. But what you're seeing here is gas and dust from the galaxy around it being sucked onto the black hole. And this gives out a tremendous amount of energy, which we can see. Now, this black hole is actually about 100 billion times the size of the Sun. And it's dragging this material onto it. This material probably comes from a smaller galaxy that the big galaxy this was originally in has eaten at some point in the recent past.
Can you give us a sense of how big this thing is that we're looking at? Is this millions of miles across, or?
The disk you can see in there is about 800 light years across, which means it's a very, very big disk.
And at the center of it, I guess there's a small little thing that's absolutely invisible.
Totally invisible, yes. It's so dense and so massive that light can't escape from it. So all we can look for is this material falling into it. And the Hubble Space Telescope allows us to look into the hearts of galaxies and see things like this. Before a few years ago, we really hadn't got any good candidates for a black hole. There were things we thought were probably black holes, but this thing is so small and so heavy, there's nothing else it could actually be.
Let me ask Pat Dash, how many pictures like this, how much information is the Hubble telescope gathering right now?
It's giving us an enormous amount of data. A figure that's been released along with this mission is 110,000 pictures so far. There was a bit of a joke early in this program that every image cost you $4 million because there hadn't been many images, but I calculated this morning, I think that price per image is now down to about $4,000. And we've had just an enormous wealth of data, even too much for the system to handle. You find the media here in the US saying, another Hubble picture, is this really such a big discovery? And the fact is that this is such a big development for us in astronomy that we are receiving enormous amounts of new data about the age of the universe, about the nature of the planets, about the size of the universe. Really universal questions.
How does this data get gathered, and how does it come back to us? Are these photographs, in the way that ordinary people understand the word, taken with some kind of a camera? Are these computer-generated images that come out of numbers that don't really have a photographic equivalent until someone here on Earth creates one with the information? Pat Dash?
Well, I would suggest Simon probably can fill in some detail. A lot of it is visual, but it has to be interpreted. And only a small amount of it is what you or I would describe as photographic. It's imagery, a lot of it, but it then has to be computer manipulated.
Okay, Pat Dash and Simon Goodwin, stay with us. When Insight returns, we're going to turn a bit away from the Hubble for a look at what some people see when they look at the heavens. Stay with us. It was almost 400 years ago that Galileo changed our vision of the universe by inventing a telescope that could see the stars. But even he would be surprised by the way some people use telescopes today. Around the world, there are thousands of amateur astronomers combing the skies each night in search of heavenly bodies that no one has ever seen before. And every so often, one of them will get lucky, and one of the lucky ones will get famous. CNN's Ann Kellen has the story of two men who got lucky at the same time.
This is what the sky looked like July 22nd, 1995, when two strangers 400 miles apart looking through amateur telescopes noticed a fuzzy dot. Alan Hale was at his mountain home in southern New Mexico. Tom Bopp was stargazing with friends in the Arizona desert. Their discovery, made minutes apart, is turning out to be one of the brightest comets to come our way this century, and is not only making friends of perfect strangers, but is linking their names in history.
At that time, I didn't know him, he didn't know me. I mean, the first conversation was probably a bit stiff because we're, trying to feel each other out.
My name is Virginia. If you could put to Virginia and Laura.
Okay.
How is it that you both discovered it at the same time?
Pure coincidence.
You know, the fun thing about discovering a comet is you get it named after you. And with the show that Comet Hale Bopp is expected to put on, it's turning Hale and Bopp into celebrities.
Thank you so much. Thank
Hale and Bob travel the country drumming up interest on the comet show. There are book signings, planetarium shows, and meetings with avid amateur astronomers. Where like proud parents, they share and compare their pictures of Comet Hale-Bopp.
Yeah, about September, I think I got some of the best images of that. Yeah, I like that one. Dirty snowballs is what they are. Chunks of ice and interplanetary dust mixed together.
Scientists can't see the core, but estimate Comet Hale-Bopp has a diameter of about 25 miles.
Congratulations on your discovery.
No, I'm an amateur.
Neither Bopp or Hale makes a living studying the skies. Though Hale has a PhD in astronomy, has written a book that they both autograph, Hale is outgoing and handles most of their calls.
The tabloid stuff stops with me. Yes.
Comet Hale-Bopp has made its way on the internet. Hale is upset over some stories that suggest unidentified flying objects are following the comet.
There's a lot of science nonsense flying around right now.
The mysterious object, says Hale, is simply a bright star near the comet.
When I was about 3 years old, my dad took me on, sat me on his lap, and watched a large meteor shower together. I've been looking up ever since. This is recent.
Hale and Bopp are two guys who grew up learning and loving astronomy. They weren't paid a dime to look at the stars that July night. They were doing what they loved to do and made history. Hale and Bopp are using their moment in the spotlight to entice others to go outside and look up. Ann Kellen, CNN, Atlanta.
It's an amazing story. Pat Dash, have you ever known people to do this kind of work? Do they have a pair of binoculars and a lot of time on their hands? How does it happen?
I do know several of them, and a lot of them seem to have got into this as children, as teenagers. And certainly with a comet like this, you are better supplied with a pair of binoculars. You don't need a telescope. And it's amazing how much you can see if you can just get away from city lights.
Let me just turn to Simon Goodwin for, I guess, the last question. We're talking about the sky and the stars. What do you think of when you look into the night sky?
Probably not what most people think an astronomer should think about. I don't actually know that many constellations. I tend to look at the sky and just think, wow, and often think about the physics going on, which is a bit boring, but tends to be what professional astronomers do.
Well, on that note of wow and number crunching, we want to thank you both, Simon Goodwin, astronomer, and Pat Dash of the National Space Society. If you want to say some wow, you can be watching in just a few hours' time. There will be more work going on the Hubble Space Telescope. You can watch it live from space, an extraordinary thing you can share in the hours to come. A final note before we go, with the exception of this week's Valentine's visit, the Hubble has a lonely time of it out there in space, alone. Well, not much longer. Japan is launching a huge radio telescope which will complement the Hubble. The telescope is in fact a joint venture involving the United States, Japan, Australia, Europe, and Canada. It will work in conjunction with telescopes on the ground and will be so powerful that if it were sitting in Los Angeles, it would be able to see a grain of rice in Tokyo. If you want to be seeing what we're doing on InSight over the next few days, visit our page on the World Wide Web. You can find us at cnn.com/insight. And we also want to know what you think of our program. Write to us, please, at insight@turner.com, or fax your comments here in the United States at 404-827-4056. But that is our program for this day. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jonathan Mann. Stay tuned. More news is next. Center, astronauts Greg Harbaugh and Joe Tanner came into Space Shuttle Discovery's cargo bay about an hour and a half ahead of schedule to replace two important pieces of the Hubble Space Telescope. They climbed into the cargo bay about 4.5 hours ago. Here's what it looked like.
and they set up shop for their 6 hours outside.
We have a go to rotate.
That is correct. Go for rotate.
As they were walking out, the Hubble Space Telescope was being rotated by ground controllers and those in the space shuttle itself. Now, one of the two astronauts, Greg Harbaugh, who you don't see there, but he's going to be coming out shortly, is... Oh, wait a second, that is Harbaugh, we're being told. He came out of the hatch, and just after he did, astronaut Joe Tanner followed. Harbaugh has been here before, but for Tanner, it was a first-time experience.
We just got TV back in time to see you come out on the beginning of your very first EVA. Welcome to space, and it was nice seeing a big smile on your face. Have a good one.
Thank you, Jeff. I think you're going to see a smile a lot today.
And there have been a lot of smiles from space so far. When they started working to replace the fine guidance sensor on the telescope, they first removed the outer cover, the yellowish-orange piece of material that you see there. It's called a scrub plate, and that removal process went like clockwork. Let's watch.
Upper right. Okay, Dr. Stevie, let's go up 6 inches. Okay, up 6 inches. That's good. Stop and take me in 6 inches. In 6 inches.
The thing that's always impressive is you look in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the Earth going by, and that's real-time rate. 5 miles a second, even from several hundred miles above the surface of the Earth, still is pretty fast when you look at down at the ground.
Better rotate clockwise.
The astronaut at the end of the robot arm is being moved remotely by the robot arm operator who is inside Discovery's crew cabin. After this plate came off, the astronauts got to work removing one piece of the space telescope that they needed to replace during this 6-hour spacewalk, the fine guidance sensor. The sensor that the astronauts replaced has several jobs. It is one of 3 instruments that keeps the Hubble telescope pointed in the right direction, and it can help distinguish motion of stars as well.
Okay, that's good.
This is some of what the replacement looked like. You can see the wing of Shuttle Discovery in the left-hand side of your picture as astronauts Harbaugh and Tanner continue their work. Harbaugh down low on your screen, Tanner attached to the robot arm.
And Joe Tanner now has installed the portable foot restraint into a socket on the telescope, climbing into the portable foot restraint.
Yeah, that's much better. Okay, Dr. Stevie, to the scuff plate, please. To the scuff plate, sir.
At one point in all this, Joe Tanner had to manhandle his partner, Greg Harbaugh, who was working in the telescope, to get the fine guidance sensor properly placed.
I'm moving to the right side. Quickly right a foot and a half or 2, Dr. Stevens. I'm sorry, Joe, say that again. Taking to the right. Go on the right. Line me up right behind Greg.
And when the new guidance sensor was finally in place, we got to see what astronaut Story Musgrave called some of the best pictures ever of an astronaut in a spacesuit doing work. Tanner was using the power tool, NASA's version of an electric drill, to seal the compartment on the telescope where the fine guidance sensor operates. The astronauts now involved in replacing one of the tape recorders where pictures and engineering data is stored while Hubble can't transmit its information live to the ground.
Yet that we've had of how the power tool works on driving the bolts. This is called the power ratcheting tool. It's the bigger of the 2 power tools that the crew members have to work with the Hubble Space Telescope. It's a very unique tool in that it has a lot of design features. It can you can set it for various different types of torques, various different types of speeds. It'll count the number of revolutions for you. It also has torque limiters to make sure that you don't over-torque the bolts or break anything.
push it in a little bit.
Now, Jerry, is this a tool that was designed specifically for Hubble, or is this a tool that can be used for other types of missions of this repair or servicing?
Well, it probably could be used for other types of missions, but it was one that was specifically designed for the Hubble Space Telescope, and all of its design features match the requirements of the HST satellite itself.
A turn or two.
They are, though, carrying another tool that was originally supposed to be tested on STS-80 during those spacewalks. Of course, those spacewalks were canceled, but the crew members were able to test that pistol grip tool on the mid-deck floor bolts, and I believe that it's being carried on this flight, and it is a space station design tool.
That's correct. It's called the pistol grip tool, and it's a battery-powered, self-contained tool. It's a fairly large one, but it also has a lot of inherent capability in it, also for selectable torques and counting the number of bolt turns, and having quite a bit of battery capacity for long duration and multiple operations that will be required on the International Space Station.
One of the fascinating things about this picture is that because the surface of the Hubble Space Telescope is so shiny, you can see the reflected image of Joe Tanner as well as the actual image of him on the left side of your screen. When we come back, astronaut Story Musgrave and astronomer Dick Miller will join us to talk about a surprise for the astronauts this morning. Considerable damage to the telescope's outer skin, a foil that protects the parts inside from dramatic changes of temperature in space. And some of the questions you emailed us overnight. We'll be back. Stay with us. Beautiful pictures from space as a couple of astronauts continue their second of 4 spacewalks to upgrade and repair the Hubble Space Telescope. So far, from everything we know, the repair mission's going pretty well. Astronaut Story Musgrave, who choreographed the first Hubble Telescope repair mission, is with us on the phone from Houston. Story, we have been listening to NASA off and on throughout the past 4 hours of this spacewalk. To me, somebody who hasn't been out there doing it, it sounds pretty good. How does it sound to you?
John, it's going outstanding. These are very friendly jobs. They've completed change out of the engineering and science tape recorder. They're documenting the inside of that bay and about to close the door.
Well, one of the things that happened, I guess 30, 40 minutes ago, the astronauts took us on a tour of the outside of the telescope and showed something about what was going on to the external skin as they moved the camera that they can actually manhandle, have close up to them. And it appeared there were some rips. It appeared that some of the outer fabric of the telescope had been crumpled somehow. Was that a surprise to you?
Yes, it was. It's occurred in the last 3 years since I was up there in November '93. We did not see a lot of those tears. We have gotten in the Mission Control Center here examples of that. Even the very external material is multiple layered, and we're thinking it may be only the very external layer which has some tears in it. So even the very external layer is multiple layers itself, but we have got a Tiger team working on that and what we might do with it. We do have a repair kit on board, which has its caddies that you can carry around that hook on your mini workstation, and it has strips of tape.
It might be another example of the many uses of duct tape, or gaffer's tape, as we call it in the TV business. It seems like it can fix anything.
Yeah, it's a very special kind of tape that actually Jeff Hoffman and myself tested in the vacuum chamber. Tape responds very different in a vacuum chamber at cold temperatures, so it's really state-of-the-art to be able to come up with something that'll work in that environment.
Yeah, well, let's hope if they feel like they have to use that, they'll be able to use your experience in the vacuum chamber to see if they can make it stick in the near vacuum of space. Story, you weren't with us last night. Your colleague Kathy Thornton was. And at one point in our special report here on CNN, we asked viewers for email questions. And we got hundreds of them, hundreds of questions from viewers all over the world. And it's fascinating. I'm thumbing through 50 or 60 pages of these that I printed out. And we've got several that we want to talk to you and to our astronomer pal Dick Miller about as well. The first question that I want to ask both of you, and Dick, let me start with you on this. There's a teacher who emailed us this question, wanting to know the best way to explain the Hubble Space Telescope and what it does to second-grade students. I've thought about this for a while. Dick, what's your take? What do you tell them about what this telescope does?
Second-grade students are probably some of the most inquisitive and excited people that look at the space telescope. So it's not a difficult task to try to convince these students of what a great and interesting experiment Hubble is performing for us. When you discuss the many discoveries that Hubble has provided us with, whether it's looking at various planets, looking at galaxies, looking at stars or star clusters, these young students are very enthusiastic, and it's very easy to discuss those with them. You certainly don't try to make it a complicated kind of discussion, but young students like this are some of the most rewarding groups of people that you can talk to about the Hubble Space Telescope and the science that it is accomplishing.
Story, what's your take on the second graders' view of Hubble and how to make it make sense to them?
It touches them. It touches very young kids. It always has, even before we launched it. I think the most important thing to tell people is that the only way that you can look at all the ways that our universe and other universes are going to talk to us is out there in space. That the messages they send to us, the signals, the character they give us, does not penetrate our atmosphere, our ionosphere, the magnetosphere, those kinds of things that thankfully shield the Earth. But the only way we are ever going to get to know our place in the universe is to observe it from out there in space, in which you can observe the messages throughout the entire electromagnetic spectrum, whether it's the infrared instruments we're just adding on, cosmic rays, X-rays, and the like. Those are all important ways the universe talks to us in addition to the visible. And, of course, out in space, you have an absolutely pure look at it, not coming through the air, clouds, and other particulates in the air. So it's an absolutely pure way to receive the character of the universe.
This is a question, I think, for Dick first, at least. There have been, and Story, jump in, feel free, either of you, to jump in our question and answer period anytime you want. There is some evidence now of planets rotating around stars other than planet Earth, and the Hubble telescope played a part in these discoveries. One of our viewers in Malaga, Spain, asks, what is it that the Hubble has told us that makes us say that it's given us evidence of the existence of other planets out there? Dick, why don't you take it first?
Well, there's several things. One, it's the irregular motion of some nearby stars. When I say irregular motion, what you have is a planet, or what we think is happening, is that we have a planet that is in orbit about a star. And as that planet orbits about that star, not only does the planet orbit about the star, but the star orbits about what is the center of mass of the two systems. And as a result, if you very carefully watch the motion of that planet, of that star, you will see the star wobble back and forth in space. And that wobble will allow you then to determine whether or not there is a planet that is a companion to that star. So one of the things it does, it does allow us to detect planets around other stars, as long as those stars are relatively nearby. We certainly wouldn't be able to see this if the stars were at some significant distance from us, because we don't have the precision to make the kinds of measurements that you would need at large distances. So these must be stars that are nearby.
Story, you want to add something?
Yeah, unfortunately, I always do.
Not unfortunate.
I'll bet you, and I think the common sense hypothesis ought to be that it is a cosmic imperative that
planetary formation does form, that is a generic process in our universe, and the hypothesis ought to be that all stars have planets. And I'll bet you when we get done and we get, centuries from now, all the information is in, I'll bet you that will be the majority, that all suns have planets.
I agree, at least in part, with Story, that the potential is there in the formation process for the formation of planets. It may be that the dynamics of a particular system may be such that may be more or less favorable.
Story, any doubt in your mind before we take a quick commercial break that there is intelligence out there someplace that we haven't encountered yet?
No, there's no question it's out there. It's only anthrocentric thinking that would lead you to believe it is not. And again, I believe that the formation of life, we will find out when we get smart enough that it also is a cosmic imperative. If you look at having suns and having planets and pushing energy, the second law of thermodynamics, pushing energy into planetary systems, that complexity itself will arise, including life.
All right, Story, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with you, Dick Miller, and take some more of the literally hundreds of questions that you viewers have sent us over the past 24 hours. Stay with CNN. We'll be back with more in a minute. Amazing pictures from space, 370 miles, give or take a mile or two above the surface of the Earth. Two astronauts continuing to work to upgrade the Hubble Space Telescope. They've completed two of the major tasks that they had to do during this spacewalk, and they have a little time left outside. And my guess is, Story Musgrave, they're going to spend some time looking at planet Earth from this unique vantage point that they have.
Well, you always do. Even when you're turning a boat and you're counting those turns, just the fact you're counting turns, watching the wrench go around does not stop that peripheral vision from catching a huge view. And, John, it really is unique being at 370 statute miles. It's not just that you're looking beyond the curvature of the Earth, but when you do look at Earth, you have to look at slant range through a lot of atmosphere. There's a huge difference between being up there at 320 nautical than your standard 160, 170 nautical. Mm-hmm. Like during the Hubble mission, I'm looking down on Florida where we launched from, and I'm seeing aurora. It's a 1,000-mile curtain just dancing over northern Canada. I never expected to see aurora on a 28.5 degree inclination flight. And also coming up on when we were at the top of the telescope, coming up. Replacing the magnetometers, before I got to Perth, I'm seeing a Great Barrier Reef. So you see the entire continent there. The scale of things is just immense. The scale, the size of the orbiter, six-story building down into the very bottom of the bay, and you're seeing the entire continent. That's what spaceflight does. You expand your horizons.
Oh, man, I think about it. I've tried to duplicate as much as you can on Earth what you described the night you were up there looking down at planet Earth, and all I can do is look at a globe. I mean, you got the real globe. You don't have to buy one at a store to see from that perspective. We've, as I said, got a lot of viewer questions. Let me ask you another one. How much farther into space will the updated telescope be able to see with the new capabilities that it's going to have? Story, have you got a thought on that?
I think Dick Miller is a much more appropriate person to answer that question.
Well, he's sitting here and ready to go, so we'll let him.
Well, I think that Hubble is going to provide us with truly an extraordinary view of space. Do we have those pictures?
They're set up.
There were a number of quasars that Hubble has looked at, and seen with ground-based telescopes, the quasars look as just single points of light. What we have now that we're looking at is what's known as the Hubble Deep Field. And this particular area of the sky is about the size of a dime seen from a distance of 75 miles.
So it's a tiny little piece of space.
It's a tiny little piece of space, and it was selected because it seemed to be a very dark, very empty area of the sky.
And did people on the ground just assume that was a part of space that didn't have anything in it?
Well, we didn't really assume that it had nothing in it, but what we did assume was that this was a region which was perhaps a bit more sparsely populated than other areas of the sky. And what you're seeing now is the sum of 342 exposures taken of this one area of the sky and added up together. This particular area shows the deepest, most distant objects that we have seen with the Hubble Space Telescope. And I think it is a tantalizing sample of what is likely to be forthcoming with the new instruments on Hubble, as well as other observations similar to this. This is an unprecedented kind of photograph. The thing that you see is a myriad of galaxies of all varieties. You find some of these that are at distances that are thought to be greater than the distances of even the most distant quasars.
Well, it's a fabulous picture. It looks like a piece of black velvet filled with diamonds. And before this, to astronomers on the ground, there was nothing they could see. So with the Hubble's new and improved instruments, it is liable to be able to give us even more pictures like this.
That's true. That's
okay.
right.
Story, I don't know if you've got a CNN TV in front of you. We're playing some tape right now showing the survey of the exterior of the Hubble Space Telescope, and it does show from on several points things that look like rips or certainly a certain amount of damage to the telescope. Is that the biggest surprise of this mission so far to you?
That's one of them, because that certainly is a change since I was up there in November 1993. We did get a little surprise on how the external airlock vented, but that was rather minor. So in terms of the telescope, yes, we've had some little tiny observations on operating the doors that were surprises, but I'd say the external covering's a major surprise so far. But we are optimistic about that.
Story Musgrave, Dick Miller, thank you both for joining us for this special report on CNN. The astronauts still outside. They'll probably be coming in the next hour or so, unless they can convince their bosses on the ground to give them a few more minutes in space. We'll keep watching. If anything of great interest occurs, we'll share it with you. John Holloman, CNN reporting.
Astronauten der US-Raumfähre Discovery haben vergangene Nacht bei einem zweiten Allspaziergang dem Weltraumteleskop Hubble in rund 7 Stunden eine neue Zieloptik eingebaut. Mit der neuen Technik wird sich Hubble wesentlich genauer als bisher auf interessante Objekte im All ausrichten lassen. Bis Montag stehen 2 weitere Weltraumausflüge auf dem Plan, um die 500 Millionen Mark teure Modernisierung abzuschließen.
Astronauten der US-Raumfähre Discovery haben die Instandsetzungsarbeiten am Weltraumteleskop Hubble fortgesetzt. Greg Harbaugh und Joe Tanner ersetzten die alte Zieloptik durch ein neues Gerät. Nach Angaben der NASA können damit Objekte im All mit einer bisher nicht möglichen Exaktheit anvisiert werden. Die Genauigkeit entspreche einem Laserstrahl, der aus 320 Kilometern Entfernung auf eine Münze ausgerichtet werde.
Mit dem Einbau der neuen Zielvorrichtung soll es nach Angaben der Weltraumbehörde NASA möglich sein, Objekte im All mit einer bislang nicht gekannten Präzision auszurichten.
Bereits zum zweiten Mal verließen die Astronauten die Discovery, um an dem Teleskop zu arbeiten. Rund 500 Kilometer über dem Pazifischen Ozean bauten die Spezialisten einen tortenförmigen Sensor für die Standortbestimmung und die Feineinstellung des Teleskops ein. Das rund 250 Kilogramm schwere Observatorium verleiht Hubble nun, laut NASA, die Genauigkeit eines Laserstrahls, der aus mehreren 100 Kilometern Entfernung auf eine Münze ausgerichtet wird. Für die nächsten Tage sind 2 weitere Weltraumspaziergänge geplant, um die 350 Millionen Dollar teure Modernisierung des Teleskops abzuschließen.
High above the Earth, U.S. astronauts Joe Tanner and Greg Harbaugh took out their tools on Saturday. They're on a mission to upgrade the Hubble Space Telescope. The astronauts fitted a device with special optics to improve the targeting quality of the telescope. Astronauts also replaced a broken tape recorder. They discovered some cracks on the telescope's skin as well, and the U.S. Space Agency, NASA, plans to boost the telescope's altitude by about 8 kilometers to prolong its life.
the US Shuttle Discovery are making their third spacewalk of a 10-day mission. The crew members are installing more new parts to upgrade the billion-dollar Hubble telescope. Among the tasks, the replacement of a wheel assembly that helps aim the telescope and the plugging in of a new computer. Scientists say they hope the improvements will help them see even farther into space. NASA, the space agency, meanwhile, is considering an emergency facelift for the telescope. It may be needed to patch holes, cracks and tears caused by micrometeoroids. The crew members are installing more new parts to upgrade the billion-dollar Hubble telescope. Among the tasks, the replacement of a wheel assembly that helps aim the telescope and the plugging in of a new computer. Scientists say they hope the improvements will help them see even farther into space. NASA, the space agency, meanwhile, is considering an emergency facelift for the telescope. It may be needed to patch holes, cracks and tears caused by micrometeoroids.
The following is CNN's coverage of a live event.
Hi, I'm John Holloman at the CNN Center in Atlanta. The two spacewalking astronauts are right here, right now. They are outside on the side of the Hubble Space Telescope. They're doing some close-up shots now of the side of the telescope. We'll show you the live picture as we talk to you about how it's gone for the astronauts who have been outside for 6 hours now. Most spacewalks that NASA has planned for the Hubble Space Telescope repair mission are designed to last 6 hours, but the astronauts are going to stretch this one as long as they possibly can. Joining us as we look at these pictures are astronauts Story Musgrave and Kathy Thornton, both of whom were at this very spot on the telescope about 3 years ago when they were in space walking around to repair the telescope, preparing it to send back the great pictures that we have seen over the past 3 years. Let's listen in because the astronauts have just replaced a reaction wheel assembly, the third of the pieces of shuttle, or rather telescope equipment they were supposed to complete on this spacewalk.
A few more. Here's a crack that goes across in spine.
Astronaut Mark Lee is describing some damage to the thermal protective film that is on the outside of the telescope.
Finding a corner someplace and just bending it a little bit.
All right, take me right, Greg, a foot.
Okay, right a foot.
The picture that we're looking at is supposed to be from an over-the-shoulder camera to give you an astronaut's view of things. The way that camera is positioned right now, it is an actual shot of the shoulder of astronaut Mark Lee, I believe, who is out at the end of the robot arm. And if that camera can tilt up, it'll let ground managers just see what the outside of the telescope looks like.
And it doesn't appear to be brittle. I'll go ahead and crinkle the corner. All right, crinkle the corner, made a crease in it, not brittle at all. I'll do it a few more times. Not very brittle. If you want me to, this piece is almost off. I can take it off and bring it in if somebody wants to see it.
If you look just to the left of the CNN Live sign on your TV set, you can see what appears to be a rip in that protective material. Multi-layer insulation, it is called. Story Musgrave and Kathy Thornton, we have talked over the past several nights about the fact that when the two of you were outside the telescope, you saw no damage to the skin at all. Well, let's listen to...
Batting 100%, the RWA aliveness test was completely successful. And also, if we could get someone to look at the 10.2 psi cabin maintenance. Step 3, we're going down towards getting an alarm.
Astronaut Mark Garneau is the capsule communicator tonight. He has been talking to the astronauts, and he just then talked to the rest of the crew of Shuttle Discovery.
What he's talking about there, John, is we manually regulate the oxygen in 19
Okay, when they come back and tell us whether they want us to tear one off or not, we'll let you decide which is the best one to tear.
All right.
And there's a tear right in the middle of the screen. You can see that.
Discovery Houston for Joe T. Payloads would rather not remove any of the MLI.
Okay, copy. We will not remove any of the MLI.
Okay. I just want to make sure they understand that the MLI, like this piece, isn't doing anything, but they're on it.
I'm sorry, Mark. I didn't copy that.
The MLI, these pieces that we take off, are doing absolutely nothing. They want to see what this stuff is like on the ground.
Yeah, I understand that. And Houston, we'd like you to reconsider that. I think it's probably of some benefit to bring that piece in.
Discovery, Joe, we will reconsider. Stand by.
We're looking at the side of the Hubble Space Telescope, where two astronauts are pointing to some damage on the protective insulation layer there. Story Musgrave, let me bring you into our conversation now. What just happened was the ground controllers said to the astronauts, don't take that piece of insulation off and bring it down to the ground. And the astronauts in space who have their own hands on this asked them to reconsider, saying it would be a pretty good idea to bring this piece of insulation down so they could see the damage that's done to it. How much of what happens in a spacewalk situation like this is up to the astronauts? How much freedom do they have to tell the folks on the ground they're making the wrong call?
You should never make your own call. It should be a team interaction, and the final authority is on the ground.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, it's not that the astronaut's taking things into his own hands, but he is pointing out, because he's out there, that this is not protecting anything in particular, and it might be good for the folks on the ground to look at.
Well, yeah, protection, John, is one thing, but the other thing is exposure of the underlying elements which do not have the thermal properties. That outside thing is that you can also get loose pieces that could float up and get in the optical path.
So there are a lot more minds thinking about this on the ground than perhaps there are thinking about it out in the cargo bay of the shuttle at this moment, I think is what you're telling me.
This is Mission Control.
Yeah, there's a whole there's an entire Tiger team here that is working MLI.
The issue was discussed again, and the decision was not to remove any of the MLI.
Okay, copy.
And it's very hard. You would like to bring some home of what's out there. I think maybe eventually we will, but it's very hard to patch up
Again, astronauts
anything you
Mark
remove.
Lee and Steve Smith closing out the reaction wheel assembly swap out. The final...
Garneau might clarify that we are to test adhesion on this tape and remove it or leave it there.
And Joe T., we would like you to leave it there.
And it's not going to, it's only stick.
And John, it's very hard to get a tape which will stick in a vacuum and also will survive the very hot temperatures of direct sun and the very cold temperatures when that part of the spaceship is turned toward deep space.
Mm-hmm. So you have to have a very special tape. Story, you were telling me the other night that you tested this particular tape in the vacuum chamber down here on Earth.
Yeah, Jeff Hoffman and myself played with several pieces of tape in the thermal vacuum chamber. We were at colder temperatures during those tests than we really ended up flying. But still, it is very hard to work with that tape in a spacesuit and a bulky glove to pull those pieces off and to lay them on. But you can see them practicing with that now.
Yeah, it's kind of a reddish-orange color, it looks like, and we saw one piece of it go up against the side of the thermal insulation. For our viewers who may not have been with us on previous nights, the astronauts last night at the end of their spacewalk noticed a good bit of damage to this thermal protective insulation layer, and luckily on board the Shuttle Discovery is a roll or two of tape that could be used to patch these things. As Story and Kathy Thornton, you told us, when the two of you were crawling around on the telescope 3 years ago, you saw no evidence of any of these problems. Kathy Thornton, how surprised are you at the damage that you have been able to see over the past several nights? Is it something that was totally unexpected?
Well, I did not expect it, because when we were up there, the telescope had already been in orbit for 3 years, and it was beautiful. It was perfect, except for a small hole in one of the high-gain antennas. So now, 3 years later, it's doubled its lifetime in space and seems to have considerable damage to some of the MLI. That's kind of a surprise to me.
Yeah. Now, the astronauts have been told that they're not going to be allowed to stay out in space indefinitely on this spacewalk, but I guess, Kathy and Story, if you're out there, you'd really like to stay out there as long as you can, just because the view is so good and the experience must be almost a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Am I right on this?
It's nice to get some time just to look around and relax and enjoy the view. And most of the time, these guys have been working pretty hard. They haven't had a chance to really enjoy it.
But we do have a lot of time tomorrow, John. It's just this 80, which is very, very friendly this time around, should really not be more than 2 hours. And then the magnetometer covers. They will have an entire half a spacewalk to work with the MLI to affect whatever solution or actions they come up with overnight down here.
Story, you're looking at this from a mission standpoint. I'm looking at it from an astronaut Mark Lee and Steve Smith standpoint. They're not going to be outside tomorrow night, so I imagine they're going to want to grab as many minutes as they can outside tonight.
That's true, but programmatic considerations are part of your heart also.
Yeah, exactly.
I bet they'd like to do the magnetometer covers.
Well, yeah, there was some discussion in the pre-flight briefing that the astronauts had as to whether they could get those magnetometer covers on tonight or tomorrow night. That process was scheduled to take place tomorrow night, and the two spacewalkers who are out there right now said in these pre-flight briefings, well, we think we'll probably have a little extra time. We'll be able to go up to the top of the telescope and do something with those covers. The thing that is most impressive about the top of the telescope is the view that you get, isn't it?
Yeah, you do get a...
Story. He outranked me. He got to do it.
Not because I outranked anybody, just the luck of the draw. There is a 360 view from up there. When you get your head beyond the top of the telescope, you do have a totally 360 view. One time when I was up there, luckily I got to go up twice, one to do the magnetometers and the next time for the covers. But even before we got to Perth, I'm looking at Great Barrier Reef, so the 360 view you get is fantastic. The other thing you do is look down into the shuttle from the eye to the bottom of the payload bay. From that vantage point, you're talking 60 feet, a 6-story building. And so that is that's a big distance too. And you try to scare yourself. You try to, think, I'm going to step off of this platform I'm on and jump down there to see if you can scare yourself. And you cannot. So it's a great vantage point. But KT was at the top of the stack too when she went up. When we were putting the solar rays, stowing the solar rays, the top there, KT was a couple feet from the top when she was up there to do that.
Yeah, you guys have had some life experiences that many of us are very envious of. We're going to take a quick break and come back and take some questions from our viewers around the world who have literally hundreds of questions for the two of you and also for our astronomer consultant, Anita Kern from the Fernbank Science Center. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Three out of four, not bad. The third of 3 scheduled spacewalks to repair and refurbish the Hubble Space Telescope, almost at an end. The two astronauts, Steve Smith and Mark Lee, still outside, and they are showing mission controllers on the ground some of the damage to the thermal protective cover on the Hubble Space Telescope. And we've been talking for the past 15 minutes or so with a couple of astronauts who know this telescope very well. We're also joined by Anita Kern, astronomer from the Fernbank Science Center in Atlanta. And as we continue our conversation, we'd like to tell you that there were several things that went a little bit wrong during this third spacewalk. There was a small problem with one switch on Mark Lee's spacesuit, and after that, the astronauts showed up outside and started work on the telescope. More very dramatic pictures from space. First 2 hours taken up with replacing a data interface unit. It's a computer that connects some of the telescope's systems with the main onboard computer. It has not worked properly since the last repair mission 3 years ago. This is what it looked like as the two astronauts were there inside one of the bays on the outside of the Hubble Space Telescope making that replacement. The replacement unit, though, has been tested. The difficulty with this replacement was the fact that there are about 20 different cables connecting this machine with the rest of the telescope. The two astronauts worked inside for the full 2 hours allotted for changing the computer and then moved to that reaction wheel assembly, which they've been working on for about the past hour. They got the word on the computer that they installed that it was working very, very well from ground controllers.
Got some good news. The commands have gone through to the Ester, and it will be ready for you when you get there. And you'll be glad to know that all the commanding has been done through the new DIU, which you just finished installing. So complete success. Good work. Great hands, Mark.
Tired hands. Yeah, fantastic. That's great.
As Mark Lee worked to close the telescope panel where this new computer was mounted, we got to see an astronaut's eye view of the cargo bay and just how shiny this telescope is with its protective insulation all around. As Discovery passed over the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific, astronaut Mark Lee said hello to his wife Jan, who is also an astronaut.
I'd like to say hello to my wife Jan down there watching this, and I'm sure she wishes she was up here working on Hubble too.
Well, Jan, you'll know that might have been the voice of your husband, but that's the picture of Steve Smith as he raised his visor for mission controllers on the ground. About 2 hours ago, Steve Smith, on the robot arm, started work to replace the 1970s vintage tape recorder, which has been picking up data from the telescope and transmitting it to Earth, replacing it with a digital recorder, which can record and play back at the same time. Now, we're getting more live pictures from space, which show the astronauts at the end of their spacewalk. You can see a checklist that they're going down at the end of this spacewalk. And you can still see one of the astronauts out on the robot arm. Let's listen to the commentary from Mark Garneau talking to the shuttle.
Probably hit about 20 minutes because FIDO has calculated that with 20 minutes, we won't have to, plus or minus 30 seconds, we won't have to worry about doing additional avoidance reboosts for Pegasus debris. Copy?
Yeah, we copied all that, Mark, and we'll go ahead and enter the attitude maneuver. You want to do that in the ADAP with 0.1 rates?
That's affirmative.
Now, last night, the shuttle was able to increase the orbit of the Hubble Space Telescope by firing some engines on the bottom of the reusable spaceship, and got it up about 2 miles above where it was when the astronauts arrived several days ago. And then, because there was some orbital debris that was being tracked from the ground, a piece of a Pegasus rocket which exploded at about this altitude that was a potential threat to the telescope and the space shuttle, ground controllers told the shuttle to raise the orbit another half mile. So already the space shuttle has been able to increase the orbit, or increase the distance from Earth that the Hubble Space Telescope will be operating from now on by about 2.5 miles. I promised you that we'd be taking questions from viewers, and hundreds of you have responded with your questions. And while we look at these live pictures, we'll do that. The first question is for Anita Kern, our astronomer friend. Can your guests explain to the layman how we know that the universe is expanding, and moreover, what lies beyond the edge of the universe? To this viewer, Steve Harrington, it seems rather paradoxical to people who aren't well versed in physics, and certainly paradoxical to those of us who sit here who aren't versed at all in physics. Anita?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, the spectrographs on the Hubble will answer that for us. And it works very much the same way that the Highway Patrol measures your speed when you're on the interstate. We actually get a spectrum of the light, and if the objects are moving toward or away from us, that spectrum of light is shifted either towards the red or the blue. And so when we look in all directions in space, we notice that things are red-shifted, which means they're moving away from us, and they're moving away at greater speeds the more distant they are. So that's mainly how we know that the universe is expanding. We also, when we talk about an edge of a universe, though, it's not really an edge in space, it's an edge in time. People call it look-back time because when you look at those very great distances, you're looking at very old light. And so when you look further and further away, you're getting closer and closer to the beginning of the universe.
Exactly. This is a question for Kathy Thornton. Kathy, probably the people who care about space exploration in the world today all remember the night about 3 years ago when you took one of the solar panels that was on the side of the Space Telescope, a panel that was badly bent out of shape, and you tossed it off into space. We probably have a picture of that we can show our viewers while I toss this question to you. What happened to that solar panel? Is it still up there? It was predicted at the time that it would burn up in the Earth's atmosphere shortly after you released it. Do you know where it is tonight?
I don't know where it is at this moment, but I think it's still in orbit. I recall last fall looking at some tracking data and seeing observation opportunities to actually see the solar ray. Yeah. But I'm not absolutely certain where it is right now.
Yeah. What happened? What went through your mind when you let it go?
Oh, I was just looking at the picture. I don't know that I was thinking anything other than it looked like a giant dinosaur cruising over the Middle East. It was just gorgeous. And when the jet plumes from the shuttle hit it on the side of the solar array where it was kinked, it actually bent over on itself, completely doubled over on itself, and then popped back out, and it had this sort of flapping motion.
It looked like a pterodactyl to me. I think that was the way I described it on television, looking like this great prehistoric bird. It was quite something. Question for Story Musgrave. Two-part question, Story. What did we learn in the first Hubble maintenance mission about working with tools in space that are able to be applied to this mission?
I just think we learned the principles of how you do business, how you do spacewalks. KT and I, Tom and Jeff, we looked at essentially, between us, every single on-orbit spacewalk ever done. We tried to extract the lessons learned, how to attack the details in various analog environments such as water, airborne floor, vacuum chambers, clean rooms, real tools to real instruments. And so we went forward with that, how to upfront early attack all the details, choreograph the entire thing. And I think that what we did on STS-82 in November of '93, I think it bore out that is a way to approach things. So I think we developed a principle, a way of doing business that could be applied to this mission and could be applied to Space Station. Hopefully we captured a methodology to go forward with.
Story, quick question, quick answer. Are the astronauts that seem to be doing these spacewalks pretty effortlessly terrific beneficiaries of what you and Kathy did 3 years ago?
I think they are. Hopefully they are, because they're exhibiting incredibly proficiency and incredibly good form.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, be right back with more of this fabulous live picture from space and these fabulous guests with good answers to your questions. Stay with CNN.
Suspect reaction wheel assembly for a refurbished spare.
Live picture coming down from the cargo bay of the Space Shuttle Discovery, where the Hubble Space Telescope repair mission continues. We've got so many questions from you that we want to get answers to from our experts. Anita, this is a question for you, and we'll, while you answer this question, we'll let our viewers take a look at your answer, as well as take a look at what's going on in space. Night before last, we showed a picture when the telescope took a look at Orion's belt and the end of the sword in that formation. Tell us about that. Let's talk about star-forming regions such as this.
Well, the Orion Nebula is a gas cloud in about 1,500 light years away that the Hubble telescope has imaged. And your graphic now is showing where this is located in the constellation of Orion. It's just in the sword under the 3 stars of the belt. And you can see this with the naked eye. It's up actually right now in the evening or early evening, and it's easy to spot. But this particular area of the sky has some hot young stars in it forming out of that gas. And
here's a Hubble picture of that.
And in this image, what Hubble has taken a picture of are something called proplyds. These new young stars have disks of gas around them that we think are solar systems in the process of forming. Initially, there were 15 that were discovered, and I think now the count is up over 100. And so it's interesting to watch these because we may be seeing something that's very similar to the way our own solar system formed 4.5 billion years ago.
Yeah, and so it's a fabulous picture. We're going to go to another quick break. 2 astronauts continuing their spacewalk out in space. We'll come back and show you more of that and have more questions answered by the experts. Stay with CNN. I think we ought to go back out in space and let our viewers see the live picture of these astronauts working. Well, I have one question for all 3 of our guests, and perhaps we'll start with the astronauts, Kathy Thornton, then Story Musgrave, and Anita Kern. NASA had planned for the Hubble Space Telescope to have a useful life until, I guess, the year 2005. Is there any reason in any of your minds this telescope couldn't stay out there and work much longer than that based on the quality of the images and the way it has been working so far?
Well, if I can take that, I would hope it would last longer than that. Certainly the instruments on board, some of them should be working for many, many years. I think it just matters how long the housekeeping functions of the telescope can function without us going up to work on it, and also the altitude of it, whether it will decay below a useful science altitude.
Story, jump in.
Yeah, we ought to, we'll see. We're planning to do it in the year 2005. We'll have to see how it goes from there. We're sure be great to keep on going. It'll also be good to come up with other telescopes in the grand observatories.
Well, exactly. It's all a matter of money, I guess. Anita, as an astronomer, would you like to see this telescope in space till 2015, 2020, something like that?
I think that'd be terrific. And they do have a history of their things lasting longer than they anticipate.
Yeah, well, right now, the astronauts are continuing to just walk around on the outside of the telescope. They're down in the area of the base. Is it, Story and Kathy, does it look like they're about ready to come back inside, or do they have more work to do out there for another 30, 40 minutes, do you think?
They're positioning things for overnight. They're taking the straps off so in case they had to leave those tool boards and that foot restraint, if they had to drop it, in other words, if they had to come home fast for some reason, and they're taking the TV camera and the other things in so as they won't be getting too cold overnight.
Last question. The quality of these pictures, I think when the 2 of you, Kathy and Story, were out there, the quality of the pictures we saw on Earth were unlike any we had seen before. I think these are even better. Has the camera equipment out in the cargo bay been upgraded over the past 3 years?
I think on STS-82 we were one of the first flights of the new camera, and I think there was only one on board, and if I remember right, it was on the elbow of the arm, and that's where we got fabulous pictures.
That's correct, KT. It was on elbow.
And they probably got more of those now. But certainly, if you look at this picture on your TV set at home, you can see just how clear and beautiful it is. Spacewalk's continuing, but they're in the home stretch for tonight. Tomorrow night, another team of astronauts goes out for the final of the 4 spacewalks. We will be here with live coverage throughout, and we hope you will too. John Holloman, CNN reporting.
Astronauts Mark Lee and Steve Smith ventured out in their white spacesuits to do the work. They had to trade out a computer switchboard, a digital recorder, and a maneuvering device. On the previous spacewalk, astronauts discovered a surprising number of cracks and tears in the telescope's outer insulation and holes punched into the solar panels by micrometeoroids. Another spacewalk is planned for Monday at about 16:30 GMT. Astronauts discovered a surprising number of cracks and tears in the telescope's outer insulation and holes punched into the solar panels by micrometeoroids. Another spacewalk is planned for Monday at about 16:30 GMT.
Cracked and damaged insulation all over the Hubble Space Telescope has convinced NASA managers to give the astronauts more work to do before they come home. Several doors around the telescope have insulation blankets that are broken and brittle, which might come off, endangering the equipment inside and the telescope's ability to take clear pictures. For the third spacewalk, a camera high above the Hubble telescope showed the Earth rotating beneath Discovery. And that was before the astronauts even got out. Once they did, they spent 2 hours replacing a computer switcher for the telescope, which has 20 different connectors around it. In the middle of this, Mark Lee sent wishes to his wife, also an astronaut.
I'd like to say hello to my wife Jan down there watching this, and I'm sure she wishes she was up here working on Hubble too.
Next up was the replacement of a reel-to-reel tape recorder with a digital one. It doesn't use tape and should be much more reliable. At the end of the walk, there was a problem. The telescope has a series of reaction wheels which keep it steady in its orbit. The job was to remove a broken one and replace it with a new model. One of the 3 bolts holding the old wheel in place wouldn't budge, so the crew got permission to manhandle it and finish the job. As the third spacewalk came to an end, the astronauts cleaned up and prepared for the insulation fix, while the crew inside Discovery boosted the telescope's orbit by about 2 miles. It's now nearly 5 miles higher than when the astronauts arrived last week. John Holloman, CNN reporting.
Der Raumfähre Discovery haben bei ihren Allausflügen Beschädigungen an der Außenhaut des Weltraumteleskops Hubble entdeckt, die vermutlich einen 5. Raumspaziergang nötig machen. Ursprünglich waren nur insgesamt 4 Ausstiege geplant. Beim 3. Ausflug ins All tauschten die Astronauten Mark Lee und Steve Smith vergangene Nacht in 6 Stunden ein Datenverarbeitungsgerät aus und brachten ein Schwungrad an, mit dem das Teleskop gesteuert werden kann.
In der 3. Nacht in Folge installierten Astronauten der US-Raumfähre Discovery neue Instrumente. Hubble erhielt Datenschreiber und ein Steuergerät. Schwierigkeiten hatten die beiden Astronauten während ihres 6-stündigen Weltraumspaziergangs aber mit der Reparatur der defekten Außenhaut des Teleskops. Um die Risse zu flicken, will die NASA die Discovery Crew jetzt zu einem 5. Ausflug ins All schicken. Geplant waren bisher 4 Wartungseinsätze.
Wenn die amerikanischen Astronauten noch einen Weltraumausflug unternehmen. Denn die Risse an der Außenhaut des Weltraumfernrohrs Hubble müssen ausgebessert werden. Um den Astronauten die Arbeit zu erleichtern, untersucht ein weltraumerfahrener Kollege an einem Modell von Hubble in einem Wassertank auf der Erde, wie die Reparatur ausgeführt werden könnte. Es besteht nämlich die Gefahr, dass Teile der rissigen Außenhaut das Fernrohr verschmutzen. Und das wäre eine technische Katastrophe. Aus Washington berichtet Tom Buro.
580 Kilometer über der Erde läuft die spannende Reparatur ab. Wie schwerelose Handwerker flicken die Astronauten die Oberflächenrisse. Filigranarbeit. Immerhin ist das hochempfindliche Innenleben von Hubble rund $2 Milliarden wert. Von den Teleskopen bekommen die Wissenschaftler Bilder, wie sie von der Erde aus unmöglich wären. Dieses bestechend klare Foto zum Beispiel zeigt eine ferne Galaxie. Mitten darin werden ganze Sonnensysteme geboren. Hubble zeigt sie bei der Entstehung. Millionen Sterne formieren sich hier. Begann so auch unser Sonnensystem? Und sieht so unser Ende aus? Dieses Bild kommt aus 3000 Lichtjahren Entfernung zu uns. Es ist ein sterbender Stern, vergleichbar mit unserer Sonne.
A star like our own sun.
In etwa 5–6 Milliarden Jahren wird unsere Sonne auch dieses Ende erleben. Wenn wir solche Bilder sehen, schauen wir also auch in die Zukunft unseres Sonnensystems. Eines der unheimlichsten Themen des Alls sind die schwarzen Löcher. Wie der Name schon sagt, kann man sie nicht sehen und deshalb auch nicht beweisen. Dank Hubble können die Experten aber nun zum ersten Mal simulieren, was in der Umgebung solcher Löcher passiert. Aber Hubble sät auch Zwietracht. Ein richtiger Streit im Elfenbeinturm der Wissenschaft tobt um die Frage, wie alt ist das Universum? Bisher dachte man immer 20 Milliarden Jahre. Wegen solcher Hubble-Fotos korrigieren einige Experten das jetzt nach unten. Dr. Macetto, der für die Europäische Raumfahrtbehörde Hubble-Bilder auswertet, ist der anderer Meinung. Wir wissen doch, dass einige einzelne Sterne älter sind als 12 Milliarden Jahre. Es kann aber kein Universum geben, in dem die Sterne älter wären als es selbst. Das macht keinen Sinn. Die Suche nach solchen Antworten lässt Hubble selber altern. Seit 7 Jahren immerhin rast das Teleskop durch Sonnenauf- und Sonnenuntergänge. Und das 16 Mal am Tag. Jedes Mal bei Temperaturunterschieden von mehreren 100 Grad. Die Astronauten müssen übrigens wegen des zusätzlichen Reparaturausflugs nicht länger im All bleiben. Die NASA rechnet mit ihrer Rückkehr zur Erde planmäßig am Freitag.
Several hundred miles above the Earth, the Hubble Space Telescope repair mission is continuing now with a fourth spacewalk. And our own John Holloman has been keeping up with the developments in space and joins us live to talk about what's happening many miles above Earth. Good evening to you.
Hi, Bill. About 375 miles up now. Just got off the phone with an astronaut who has been working on the ground to help teach the astronauts in space how to do some of these emergency repairs to the telescope they're going to have to do tomorrow night. What they're doing tonight, and I can sort of illustrate it on our model, is the astronauts will be going outside about 30 minutes, but they're going to be working in 3 places on the telescope. They'll first be working here, replacing a machine that makes this solar panel move to find the sun when it's supposed to. Then they'll be climbing up the outside skin of the telescope to an area right here behind this antenna, which is called a high-gain transmitting antenna. And what the ground controllers are going to have to do is extend this antenna while the astronauts are climbing to get it out of the way. So the astronauts will come up here, fix some insulation, fix some covers on some pieces of electronic equipment called magnetometers located here and here, and then begin to fix a rip that is sort of an upside-down V shape up there at the top. We've got some video that was provided to us a few minutes ago that shows you where that rip is, and we can look at that together while I talk. There it is behind the high-gain antenna. It's sort of an upside-down V shape there in the center of your screen. They've developed some things inside the shuttle they're going to use to patch that hole, they say. The astronauts going out tonight are Greg Harbaugh and Joe Tanner. They're in Discovery's airlock, waiting to go outside and make the final scheduled repairs to the telescope. They'll be outside probably 35 minutes from now, about 40 minutes after this hour. The walk is scheduled for 6 hours, but in the past, the astronauts have stayed outside 7 hours or more to finish their work. This is what it looks like when they go outside. Now, this is where on the telescope the astronauts will be working, at about the area where you see that spacewalker from last night working. A few minutes ago, mission controllers steered cameras outside the telescope to show us the work site. The electronics box behind door number 7 on the telescope's exterior, I've already showed you. It has a number of tiny screws which the astronauts will have to undo by hand, and it has a replacement drive electronics box which will be installed over the next 2.5 hours. On the last trip, 3 years ago, this box was removed and brought back to Earth for repair. It had burned out transistors, which made it tougher for the telescope to move one of its solar panels to find the sun and charge the internal batteries. When that's done, the astronauts, as I say, will climb to the top and do some work up there. No live pictures from outside because the astronauts aren't outside yet. This time last night, they had already started their spacewalk. They're getting tired. Jerry Ross, the astronaut I talked to in Mission Control, said he's getting tired. He said, I bet you, Holloman, want some vacation at the end of this. And he is absolutely right.
Listen, a fifth spacewalk, one more has been added. Is that any problem for them? Are they prepared for this before they head up in space?
They weren't prepared to do, they thought the telescope was going to be pristine. Yeah, what they are doing, I just saw some pictures. The astronauts are manufacturing things out of whatever they can find inside the shuttle. They took a piece of wire that looks like coat hangers to make a connector strip, and 2 of them were showing it on TV. Looks like a piece of coat hanger bit into sort of a figure-8 shape. They're going to use that to make a 15-foot piece of rope be longer, effectively, than 15 feet.
Gotcha. And so the release Hubble when?
I think they'll still do it when they were supposed to, which well, no, they won't. They're going to delay the release an extra day, too. It was going to be released tomorrow night. It'll be a night after that, which will be Tuesday night.
And back on Earth later in the week, then?
Yep, we'll be here for the whole thing.
Good deal. John, thanks.
Okay.
One reminder to our viewers, stay tuned to CNN for our continuing coverage of Discovery's activities in space. And certainly set your VCRs for CNN's special presentation on the Hubble telescope mission that comes your way at 4 a.m. Eastern Time, 1 a.m. Pacific. And thanks again to John Holloman.
The crew of the U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery is busily getting on with another Hubble refurbishment job. It's the last scheduled spacewalk of the mission, and CNN correspondent John Holloman is here with us to walk us through it. John.
Well, Fiona, this is going to be quite a spacewalk. It's underway. Before we take you to the live pictures from space, let me show you on our model where the astronauts are working. They are working behind door number 7 on the side of the Hubble Space Telescope. Behind that door is an electronics drive unit which makes the solar panels on the sides of the telescope move back and forth. This is the second one of these units that's been replaced. Let's go out into the cargo bay of the space shuttle now and look at the live pictures as they come in. 2 astronauts are out there. Greg Harbaugh who, if you can see the legs on his spacesuit, and it'll be difficult in this light, you'll see dashes of red tape on his legs. With him, Joe Tanner, who has solid red stripes on the legs of his spacesuit. They are beginning what will probably be a 6-hour spacewalk, going to make the final scheduled repairs to the Hubble Space Telescope. In the past, despite the schedule of a spacewalk for 6 hours, the astronauts have stayed out considerably longer than that. Now, we've shown you where on the telescope they are working right now. A few minutes ago, mission controllers steered cameras outside the telescope to show us the work sites, but while we have the live pictures, let's ignore those tape pictures from earlier. And let's pause for a second and listen to what the astronauts are saying as they work to get that door number 7 that I showed you, which is to come open. You can see it's opening now.
The 6 bolts holding the protective door to bay 7 closed are now are opened, and the first step is for the crew members to secure that door so that it will not move back and forth.
They'll lock it out of the way on the left of your screen as they go inside. Now, this is going to be a very tough maneuver for the astronauts, perhaps the most difficult hand motion they will have. As you know, they're in bulky spacesuits with very thick gloves on their hands. And this electronics box has a number of tiny screws, which the astronauts will have to undo by hand. There's a replacement drive electronics box, which they'll bring up and install over the next 2.5 hours that they're there. On the last repair trip 3 years ago, this box that's going to be installed was removed, brought back to Earth for repair. It had a bunch of burned out transistors, which made it tougher for the telescope to move one of its solar panels to find the sun and recharge the batteries. When that is done, the astronauts will climb up to the top of the telescope. It is something that all astronauts say is just about the most beautiful sight they have ever seen. They are 20 meters above the cargo bay at this point, and from there they get a view of the Earth that is more spectacular than any that has ever been seen by human beings. While they're up at the top, they'll repair some insulation and some solar covers for magnetometers, which are located right at the top. While they're up there, they'll also repair some insulation near the top of the telescope, which has started to peel away, sort of like wallpaper when it gets old. To do this, the big high antennas, which for most of this repair mission have been folded up on the side of the telescope, will be extended to get them out of the way for the spacewalkers. Having the antennas extended will make the robot arm operator's job more difficult, because he has one more thing to avoid hitting as he maneuvers the spacewalkers up and down to do this final bit of repair work. Everything that we have heard from Mission Control and from CNN consultant for the night, Story Musgrave, the man who orchestrated the first Hubble telescope repair mission, indicates things are going well. Let's listen again, just for a second, to what the astronauts are saying as they get that door latched out of the way and begin to crawl inside the telescope.
Story and Jeff.
You'll be hearing Greg Harbaugh and Joe Tanner. Tanner is at this moment out at the end of the robot arm, and over to the left of your screen is where astronaut Harbaugh is located. They were conducting a spacewalk 2 nights ago, or 2 days ago at this time, depending on your perspective. Shuttle, by the way, now is flying over the Atlantic Ocean. It's just crossed over Panama and is on its way to Africa. The sun will be coming up for the astronauts in a matter of 10 or 15 minutes, and the pictures will be more spectacular at that time if we're allowed to see them. So we'll keep you posted. We'll watch this shuttle repair mission as it continues, and as soon as we get more to report, other than things are going swimmingly, I'll come back and let you know.
Okay, John, and CNN plans to bring you John Holliman's live coverage of the shuttle cruise spacewalk about 4.5 hours from now.